Hello, friends. You are listening to Mars Talk, a community discussion about humanity's future in space. We are presented by the Mars Society, and today is episode 5. Now, if you are interested in helping make this the best future a reality, we need volunteers. So we're looking for social media, scheduling, and editing volunteers. Email info@marstalk.org. Now, as always, we want to advise our listeners that all of the opinions expressed on this podcast are the views of the individuals expressing them and are not necessarily the views or position of the Mars Society. We are a large international organization, and while we share in the core belief that we should have humans living on Mars, we may and probably will disagree on many other things. And as I've said before, you disagree with me and you're definitely wrong, right? No. So joining me today is, of course, James Burk, but we also have Mike Newberg and Greg McCauley. James is the senior manager at Arctic Consulting, the director of IT and a steering committee member here at the Mars Society, and the organizer of the Seattle Scrum Meetup, as well as a producer on this very show. Now, Mike Newberg is a member of the Indiana Astronomical Society. He is also the Director of Public Engagement at the Link Observatory Space Science Institute. And Greg McCauley worked on Apollo 15, 16, and 17 at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas, is the former CEO of Advanced Imaging, Inc., and currently serves as the Solar System Ambassador for NASA JPL. He is also a member of the Indiana Astronomical Society and is the Executive Director, CEO, and co-founder of the Link Observatory Space Science Institute. We thank him, Mike, James, and most importantly you for joining us today.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Good to be here.
Thanks for having on. Thanks for coming on, guys. I can't speak this morning, apparently. Okay, so we're going to jump right into our news segment here. Our first story is President Trump's tweet, the fallout and the dreaded politics involved with that. So his tweet was as follows. For all the money that we are spending, NASA should not be talking about going to the moon. We did that 50 years ago. They should be focused on the much bigger things we are doing, including Mars, of which the moon is a part, defense, and science. Several people, including news outlets, went into a huge kerfluffle, a highly technical term, over the tweet, claiming it put the Artemis program that this administration has directed to NASA in jeopardy. Later, clarification from the White House says that it was a message of impatience and keeping focus on the Mars mission. Now, when I was going through my Twitter feed, I read the tweet. I actually retweeted it because it was obviously related to what I always look for in space-related news. And it didn't even faze me. It sounded just like what they were saying, like he's wanting us to focus on Mars and not on the moon. And also, Trump being who he is, I kind of just passed it off as him being himself. But a lot of people took it a lot differently. So what do you guys think about all of that?
Yeah, I think for me, it really showed that how fragile the current Artemis project is. We haven't gotten the funding for it from Congress yet. And so anything that might destabilize that happening, I think people get very nervous about. You could read that tweet a lot of different ways. It was somewhat of an ambiguous tweet. You could read it as he doesn't want to go back to the moon now, which a lot of people did, and a lot of people were up in arms about that. But you could also read it as, and I think correctly, and this is what NASA's party line is that Mars is the ultimate goal and the moon is a stepping stone, and we should be talking about the ultimate goal, not something we've already done before. That's kind of how it's landed now for me after 3 days.
Yeah, I think my feeling as far as Trump being Trump, that's just sort of his MO to sort of rattle the sabers a bit, get everybody worked up, get everybody excited, and then say, okay, now that everybody's paying attention, let's talk. And I guess history will see if that method has paid off. But yeah, I wasn't too worked up about it. Again, it's a process. I think you mentioned the impatience with SLS, the fact that it is way behind schedule, and I think there has been some issues with that as well. We keep saying, okay, it's going to launch this month, this year. Now we've pushed it back, and so now I think the pressure is starting to come onto NASA to say, okay, you guys really need to get this thing going, because I think with SpaceX and Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic and all these other commercial space ventures, coming into fruition and having success, now everybody's saying, okay, NASA, it's your turn now. So, really, you don't need the moon to get to Mars, but I think basically it would be an inspiration to get people excited about it, just to see us going back and realizing Gene Cernan's wish that, we will go back at some point. So that's my
Jim Bridenstine might disagree with you. I got a quote coming up later in the show.
I know.
But my opinion is that number one, no matter what the president tweets, they're gonna beat him up over it. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just another one of those things. But it's like going to Mars is like someone from here in Indiana said we're going to take a trip to Los Angeles and we're going to stop in Albuquerque along the way. And then everybody talks about our trip to Albuquerque. Well, we're not going to Albuquerque, we're going to LA. And, Albuquerque is kind of on the way there, and we need to stop there for various reasons. It's obvious, I think, to everyone that all of the understanding how to live off planet, all of that beta testing needs to be done on the moon because it's close by. And then once we develop those technologies, move them onto Mars, it's the only thing to do, I believe. What I found interesting here a month or so ago is when the Vice President of the United States said, we're going to go to the moon in 2024 with or without NASA. And that was a pretty bold statement. And there was a reason behind that, I believe. So this whole thing is interesting, exciting. We're back in the game again after 50 years or almost 50. And so interesting subject.
Yeah, I remember from, I believe it's the same speech you were talking about where he announced the Moon 2024 moonshot before it was called Artemis.
Yes.
That, if NASA is not up to the challenge in the way it's currently organized, then NASA needs to change. And I think that's actually, we're kind of seeing the sausage being made a little bit with NASA right now, in that it is in the process of changing, but some of the old things are still holding on. And I think in some ways that's not necessarily NASA's fault. I think there are some contractors, lobbyists, senators, representatives in Congress that like the old way because it benefits them greatly. And so they are, and they have a position of power over the purse strings and other things with NASA. And so it's hard for them to please everybody, because there are some mutually exclusive things trying to be done here. I don't know if y'all agree with that, but that's kind of my best read on the situation right now, and it's a little bit frustrating.
I don't think it's the same NASA that we had back in the Apollo days. I worked for that NASA. It's just not the same situation. Back 47 years ago or whenever, when I was there, it was they were bold, pioneering organization of risk takers, and it was exciting. Every single day was exciting because we were blazing new trails and people's lives were on the line. And they changed from that into simply managing their annual budget for the last decades. I feel sorry for them. There was no real step after Apollo. There was no real next step. Mars certainly wasn't the next step. We were no way prepared to go to Mars back then. I don't think we were prepared to go to the moon, to tell you the truth. I think we were pushing the envelope back then. But I am a believer and lover of NASA. More power to them. Maybe commercial space exploration and the threat of China dominating space exploration on planet Earth. Maybe all of that will be the impetus for Congress getting excited about funding future bold projects.
Yeah,
We
that's
need
well.
China.
That's really well said, Greg. I think, and we've talked on this podcast about whether there or not there's a space race, and whether we should see China or as a partner or as a competitor. I think anything that helps us get back into out of low Earth orbit and out to the moon and to Mars is a good thing. I also really liked your point earlier that if you're going to LA, you need to stop in Albuquerque to test your equipment. I think the moon is a good place to go to test out a Mars program's hardware, but we need to all be, keep focused on the end goal, which is going to Mars.
Right. I agree.
Agreed.
I agree.
Okay, we're all in agreement there. Where's the discussion? I don't know. No, I actually I agree with James too, Greg. That your point was very well made. It really struck me, so I appreciate it. Let's go ahead and move on to the next story. We got Paul Wooster. He spoke at the Humans to Mars Summit. He is the principal Mars development engineer at SpaceX and spoke last year at Mars Society's 21st annual convention. He spoke on the technologies that SpaceX is working on and needs to do. Basically, here at the Mars Society, what we do all the time. So he is talking specifically about things like needing power, how we're going to do that, water, logistics, shelter, food. SpaceX, they see themselves as a transportation company, but they also are cognizant of the fact that in order to have something to transport, all of these other things need to be in place. And so they're actively looking for partners to work with them to get these things done. And I think it actually goes straight to the point that was just made, which is, we're going to the moon and to Mars. Blue Origin, I think, is more focused on the moon. I think SpaceX is more focused on Mars. I think we're going with or without NASA. I think NASA should be a part of that. I think NASA has a big role to play in that still. And my kid he's super excited today because today is his first day wearing his new NASA backpack to his invention camp. Okay, so it's one of those things where there's a lot to be done. What do we think about the things that need to be done? Who do we think could possibly provide those things? And how can we hit that point home to also bring it back to NASA?
Well, I think NASA will be a part of us going to Mars, whether it's Elon Musk driving it forward or others. There'll be a NASA logo on the ship that lands on Mars. I'm sure of that. And I just want to mention Paul Wooster. He's been around the Mars Society a long time. When he and I are about the same age, when we were both much younger men walking around the 1999 Mars Society conference. I remember those times, and it's really cool to see him at a leadership role at SpaceX. But he's been working on this for a very long time, as a lot of us have. There's a lot of technology development that needs to happen for us to build a permanent settlement on Mars and for us to live and thrive. And, I wrote an article recently, I posted it on LinkedIn, all the different technologies that you could take and go build a startup with to go figure out, things like 3D printing and creating methane from the Martian air and water so that, you have a compact, small, reliable unit. All these different technologies that need to be developed also will have applications back here on Earth. And so there's so many things so many opportunities right now for companies to come in and help out with these tasks and help SpaceX out. And so I think, I'd love to see SpaceX do something like a technology development fund or a technology contest where they're actively soliciting other companies to help them build these technologies and demonstrate them here on Earth so that we're all ready to go to Mars.
I like that idea.
Yeah, get the young people involved as well. Just start canvassing input, college students, and engage them. And that's what we try to do at the Link Institute is get kids inspired to think about things like this in the future. But I think to get to Mars, I don't think it's going to be the USA anymore. I don't think it's going to be one country. I think we're really going to need to pull our resources. How do we break down those geopolitical barriers to bring everyone together? I don't know how one country is going to be able to pull this off. That's my feeling. It can be done, and it will be done with the will. But I think that's going to be the big challenge: is how do we think as one to get there? It's a big task.
I'd like to refer, if I could, to my days at NASA during the Apollo program, because I'm the oldest of the crew, it looks like. And, there were 400,000 people involved in sending astronauts to the moon at Apollo, and a very, very, very small fraction of those people worked for NASA. When I was at the Manned Spacecraft Center in Houston, which is now Johnson Space Center, there were 14,000 people there. And I'm not sure I knew more than 4 or 5 people that actually worked for NASA. I worked for Vought Aeronautics. The people I knew worked for Boeing and Lockheed and Singer and Ford. I could go down the list of contractors. All had their own core competencies, and all were responsible for their little piece of this whole project going to the moon. And going to Mars is going to be the same thing. SpaceX core competency is building boosters and re-landing them. They do a good job at that. But logistics and food and water and agriculture and healthcare, those type of things are going to be managed by a whole cadre of American and international companies who that is their core competency. And together we're going to send people to Mars. It's going to be a huge effort. And NASA is going to be a very, very, very small piece of the puzzle. It's going to be funded by governments, but it will be run, built, and energized by private industry. Apollo, Mercury, Gemini, Apollo was the same way. It was not NASA. They were the administrator. It was American workers that collectively put those people on the moon.
Well,
yeah, well said. And I think, you do have some of these emerging companies with different core competencies relative to a Mars base. Like you think of Bigelow Aerospace and all the work they've done over the last 15 or so years on pressurized habitats. I was reading an article over this weekend about why don't we just have, to go back to the moon, let's just have SpaceX and Blue Origin do a contest to land a Bigelow Aerospace habitat on the moon. Like that would solve all this, and it would cost a couple billion. So I think to Greg's point, when we go to Mars, it's going to be all these different companies and subcontractors of them that are helping to get the hardware built, tested, and used. And there's all kinds of companies that are going to be involved, some of which don't exist yet.
Right. So I think that one of the questions I had for you, Greg, you were talking about how NASA was just a small part, and this was a much bigger endeavor. And I think NASA, if they've done anything well in the past 50 years since the Apollo program, I guess really 40 years, it's developing good relationships with international partners, not all of which are traditionally friends of the United States. Do you see that being a big role moving forward, the way Mike was talking about how we really need to think of this as in an international sense and as an Earth thing and not a United States thing per se, let alone just a NASA thing?
I certainly hope so. I mean, the last thing you want to do is bomb your partner. And so I think that, if one of the things that we have said many times in our dealings with the public is that we thought the International Space Station should be awarded the International Peace Prize, because it was one of the only times when people who used to be enemies were working together in one space over a long period of time and really enjoyed working with each other. And this doesn't happen other places, it seems. And so I believe that the best way to, as we had talked before, the best way to work together and find common ground between people with different ideas is to work on something audacious, an audacious, magnificent goal where everyone can benefit and we can all be excited to work together. I think it'd be wonderful if we work with China, in going off to the moon. My guess is we probably won't. And it may end up that we are racing China back to the moon like we raced the Russians to the moon back in the 60s. Mm-hmm. And by the way, if it hadn't been for that race, we wouldn't probably have gone. Right. We wouldn't have done all this had it not been for our race with the Russians. Yeah. And so to create the political will to spend the money and get focused on going back to the moon, we probably need another adversary that will beat us to the punch. And I don't know if you want to talk about this today or not, but there is the possibility of helium-3 mining on the surface of the moon, which could very well be the next petroleum. And so, and China made a statement, it was in the Wall Street Journal back in 2015, actually, that they were going to dominate the helium-3 market. And Wall Street Journal said at the time, nobody in America is kind of paying attention to these guys. And if they understand helium-3 fusion as a possible next energy source, and they dominate helium-3 fusion on the surface of the moon, they will be the world's only ultra power. You read into
coming up with a new name, okay?
Say again.
You coming up? Well, we went from power to superpower. Now we're going to ultra power.
Yes. Superpowers. There's a handful of them. Ultra power. There's just one.
Let's dig in on that. I have absolutely no. It's not something I had on my agenda, but that is utterly fascinating to me. So, tell us, what exactly is helium-3, and why is it potentially a important resource?
Well, for those that just don't know what helium-3 fusion is not a current technology. Fusion, creating energy through fusion, much like a nuclear power plant, as you understand how they work. You create heat, that heat heats up water, creates steam, that runs turbines, etc. And the problem with nuclear power is that there's nuclear waste. There's a possibility of core melt, and just you have to do something with all this spent uranium. The problem in Japan a few years ago comes to mind.
Fukushima.
Yeah, and you have vast quantities of land that are contaminated for decades. Helium-3 fusion is much different. Hydrogen fusion, as an example, produces a very high energy neutron, these pesky neutrons that become problematic during the fusion process. You have to be able to capture or insulate from these high energy neutrons. Helium-3 fusion doesn't create a high energy neutron. You mix it with deuterium you get from the ocean water, you blend the two gases together, you fuse them, a very high density energy is produced at very high temperatures, and you can create power plants that are safe and clean, no nuclear residues after the process is finished. That process still under investigation. We don't have any of those yet, but the Earth has no helium-3 deposits. Helium-3 is a byproduct of solar fusion, is part of the solar wind, and it's diverted around the Earth by the Earth's magnetosphere. So it's very rare on planet Earth, but it's been embedded in the solar regolith for the last 4 billion years. And so
the lunar regolith, yeah.
Yeah, the top 9 inches, I think I've read, is the concentration rate is 50 parts per million or 50 parts per billion, but it can be extracted very easily by mining the top surface, the top 9 or 10 inches of regolith. You heat it up to 600 degrees Celsius. It boils out the helium-3. You put that into gas canisters. You send it back to Earth, and once the helium-3 process, when and if it has been fully developed here on Earth, all of a sudden the helium-3 gas from the moon becomes worth $3 billion a ton. So there's this giant economic effort that could be in our future to mine helium-3. 3 shuttle cargo bay fulls, if you can imagine that, full of canisters of refined processed helium-3. 3 of those would be enough to power the entire planet for a year. And each one of those payloads, this is just what I have read from people that I believe are worth listening to. Each payload is about 25 tons at $3 billion a ton. That makes each mission have a current commercial value of $75 billion per mission. And there's enough helium-3 on the surface of the moon to power planet Earth for 100,000 years. Now, if you look back into China's last 2 missions to the moon, the last one being on the far side, and look at what they're doing, scooping up regolith and looking for, commercial.
And they're going to be doing a sample return mission very soon here from the moon back to China.
Yeah. And so just take a look at that. It's a fascinating thing you don't hear much about, but it's the value of the moon. I believe maybe we don't hear much about it because who in their right mind in this country would agree to us strip mining the surface of this beautiful moon of ours? But it makes it commercially advantageous if in fact those technologies are available. And I believe they are.
Well, and who's going to have the same issue if they do it on the far side?
Well, all of us would, because in 1967, the Outer Space Treaty that was signed by 104 different nations says that nobody can own property off of planet Earth. You can't build military bases there. Take a look at, as an example, take a look at the continent of Antarctica. Antarctica has 7 territories divided up in a pie-shaped from the South Pole outward, like pieces of the pie. Yeah. 7 territories. They're not. It's the 7th continent. It's the only continent that doesn't have its own countries, but it has territories that are owned by existing countries elsewhere on the planet Earth. Now, if you look at how we've done that in Antarctica, is it possible, here's a question, that in our future, the moon becomes our 8th continent? Mm-hmm. If the moon becomes our 8th continent, and now countries have territories on the surface of the moon from which they can mine helium-3 for their own purposes, does that then warrant the development of a space force to protect our interests on the surface of the moon? And you start to put those, I'm not trying to start a conspiracy theory here, but if you start to put those pieces together, you say, well, maybe mission to Mars, yeah, it's a wonderful thing and we need to go there. But the moon has the capability of being a very important resource for us here on planet Earth. It's worth investigating, I believe.
Okay. So explain that a little bit more for me. I'm a little bit simple-minded sometimes, a little bit dense sometimes. So you're talking about, having territories rather than ownership or continents. What's the difference between having a territory and owning the land?
I don't know that. I mean, I just know that in Antarctica, of the 7 continents on planet Earth, all of them have these countries that are independent. They're independently run and managed. They have their own leadership of various forms of government. Antarctica is different because it doesn't have its own countries. There are territories that are owned by existing countries. And there's a treaty, there's an Antarctica treaty that was signed in 1979, I think, or something, that disallows military bases there. It disallows a variety of things on that continent to preserve the environment. But it's just an interesting thought. I'm not predicting this will happen. But the thought is, if we find real value, commercial value, or resource value on the moon, how are we going to manage that, since the 1967 Space Treaty says no one country can own property on another heavenly body? We're going to have to modify that somehow. And might that look like our dealings in Antarctica? It really is an interesting thought.
Yeah, the Outer Space Treaty, I actually did a paper on this in high school. It needs to be revised, because right now, if you go build a moon base or a Mars base and you're the United States, you don't own the property. You can't really do anything with the resources there legally. It is kind of like, the law of the seas right now, where it's all international waters, so to speak. And obviously, if we're going to settle the moon and Mars, we need to update that legal regime and have, if there's a legal dispute in space between 2 countries or 2 individuals or 2 companies, how does that get settled? There's a lot of legal work to do here. And there are folks working on that, but there's nothing that has borne fruit yet recently. But yeah, and another point I wanted to make is helium-3. Yeah, great resource. We need to have hot fusion reactors to really utilize that, but I'm sure they're coming. I mean, it's all about, you need to heat up those helium-3 atoms to a very high temperature, extremely high temperature, to unlock the energy within them. And if you can do that cleanly without, that activity itself generating radiation, then the helium-3 separation will also not generate radiation. So it's a very clean source of energy that someday we'll be able to harness. And another resource on the moon, along with helium-3, is water, because all those, as we've been talking about on this podcast, there are permanently shaded craters where comets have deposited water over the last billions of years. So, that's two big things you can get on the moon that are, right, it's 3 days away. That's a whole economy that's just waiting to be developed. And
Exploited.
I think
Well, and isn't there a lot of materials to make aluminum as well?
aluminum, glass, there's a book that I helped edit last year, Pioneer's Guide to Living on the Moon by Peter Koch, and he talks a lot about the future lunar basalt industry and all the products you can make from the moon, from the regolith and the raw materials on the moon. It's quite extensive.
Because if you could manufacture a rocket on the moon rather than here on Earth, that's going to be a competitive advantage because the gravity well's so much less, right?
Absolutely.
And so you're going to be able to get it to a lot more places with a lot less energy.
It
Right.
takes 90 times, I believe this is right, 90 times more energy to get something off the surface of the Earth into orbit than something off the surface of the moon into orbit, simply because of the reduced gravitational field.
Yeah.
So,
And
anyway,
it's a big difference
too. The atmosphere also provides
Right.
a lot of drag for rockets
Right.
taking off from Earth, and
this is fun discussion.
That's what we're here to
That's
do,
what
right?
we do
That's
here,
all.
yeah.
If we're not having fun, we're not doing it right, okay?
That's right.
We'll have to mix it up. So, I was going to make a point very similar to what James was saying. Basically, if we, I see the treaty that we currently have ending one of three ways. Either one, and the most preferable, I would say, is we come up with a new treaty or agreement or whatever its name is, whatever it's called. Maybe it's an accord or a constitution or whatever it's called. But we come up with a new one that supersedes and replaces the old one that speaks to the things that are going on now and in the foreseeable future so that it now works for everybody. Number two is somebody that either that process doesn't go well, it doesn't happen soon enough, and so somebody just ignores the treaty and then problems ensue because of that, and that's probably the least desirable way. Mm-hmm. Or somebody ignores it and problems don't ensue for it because everybody's like, yeah, that wasn't that's not relevant anymore, and so there's not a new agreement, but there's kind of an unwritten agreement, so to speak, or an unwritten rule that people go with, and I think that's also not as preferable. I can't really think of any other ways that it would go, but that's my best guess as to how it would work.
Well,
Go
I
ahead,
just
Mike.
say with the agreements, yeah, because the moment you find a moneymaker on the surface of the moon or the surface of the Mars, that's going to change the game. Like Greg said with helium-3, if that really pans out, that involves money. That's the ultimate
Motivator.
Yeah, motivator. So I think you're going to have to word these things carefully because, like Greg said, yeah, this is not the same NASA we're living with. This is not the same space race we're living with as we were 50 years ago. And China is not beholden to the taxpayers the way we are. If they decide they want to build a Mars rocket, they're going to do it no matter what their populace says. So I think that's something that we're going to have to address because, yeah, absolutely, money is going to be, unfortunately, the ultimate X factor here and what we deal with as far as upgrading our agreements. So yeah.
Well, I almost feel like, and this is not, I am not by any means the first person to make this analogy. This is less analogous to the last time we went back to the moon, and it's more analogous to when Europe came over to North and South America and started populating North and South America and taking those resources and bringing them back to Europe and superpowers were created in that time frame. That the reason you and I are speaking English right now is because of what happened during that time. You know, I think the level of change to our civilization over the next 50 to 100 years is going to be staggeringly more than even us sitting here thinking about it can imagine, let alone somebody that's just, watching some reality TV at home.
Oh my, I think, this, yeah, we as humans, I'm not real optimistic that we have changed a lot over the centuries from when you said we came to the New World, and although it was populated with others, we decided this was all ours and we were going to take it and send the resources home. Questions I think for the future would be, and this is what worries me, I believe, is what happens when if there are territories up there, and we are mining natural resources, and one of the countries crosses the line, and they go from their territory into ours. What happens then? One of the other things I'm very concerned about is what happens to the existing Apollo landing sites. Will there be a thing like UNESCO or World Heritage sites that protects those, from people? Can you only imagine how much the 9-rung descent ladder on Apollo 11 lander, if the Eagle lander, would be on the commercial market if somebody stripped it? I mean, it's like going up there and stripping a car, like if they do in LA on the 5. I mean, what's going to prevent people from going up to these unbelievably historic landing sites? And there's all kinds of stuff still up there. The descent stage for all the lunar landers are still there.
Well, I mean, my hope, and not to say that I'm holding my breath that this will happen, but my hope would be that they become something along the lines of a national or international park, or I don't know if you'd call it a worldwide park, the world being Luna in this case. A Luna park. I don't know what you would call it. I'm coming up with this off the top of my head, but it'd be some sort of,
universal park.
What we have here in the United States and other countries have, like a national park, and it's almost like a museum piece that, you somehow build some sort of scaffolding so you don't even disturb the footprints of the original astronauts and what have you. And you create a place where you could go visit, and it becomes an experience, and you learn about it, and it's part of our history. The same way that we go to a museum and look at Lewis and Clark's artifacts and the Spirit of St. Louis plane hanging there in the Smithsonian. It's the Smithsonian, right?
Yep.
And those types of things. That's what I would hope would happen. That's the ideal future.
That's up to the countries to cooperate. I mean, with the United States, we have one government to keep an eye on all the states and protect those national parks and monuments. We can't exactly tell China, hey, don't mess with our lunar landers, don't steal our flags. Or we can't say the same thing to Russia. So,
I have a feeling that we would actually say just that, even if we don't really have much standing to do so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well,
those are big questions, interesting to talk about. Nobody really knows what the outcome is going to be.
Well, it's only by, I think, talking about them, thinking them through, and working towards a preferred solution that we'll actually get to that preferred solution.
Yeah,
so that's part of our hope.
What's your opinion about the development of the Space Force that the president's talking about? I believe it could be part of this whole puzzle, because we're going to have to, if we do have commercial interests in space, step 2 is being able to protect those interests. Mm-hmm. And we're going to have to do it militarily, probably. We always have.
So I think I am woefully unqualified to have a learned opinion about that yet. But what I do know about it so far is I know that Space Force is necessary, if only because China, while they don't have a Space Force, they are doing the equivalent for themselves. And India is as well. Actually, I read an article this morning, or I skimmed an article, and I didn't put it into this podcast because I intend to put it in episode 6, because I have a cutoff date so that I can actually know what I'm talking about on the podcast. But the article was along the lines of India and how it's ramping up its military in space and developing its stuff for its main competitor as it sees it, China. And China, they've they've developed anti-satellite and lasers and all kinds of different things that they can do in space, capabilities that they have in space militarily to protect their interests. If we don't do the same, we'll be just run over. Now, on the other hand, my best understanding of things right now, I mean, I've played a lot of Kerbal Space Program, so I can't say that I have the kind of experience that's, an astronaut or somebody working at NASA might have, but I do know a thing or two about orbital mechanics, and the way orbital mechanics works, I almost feel like it's going to be pretty difficult to protect your interests militarily if actual fighting starts to happen up there in a way that would keep the orbital field around Earth, capable of being transported through without orbital debris hitting you. It's already a problem, and then we've been very diligent about it for the most part. That it's only going to get worse and almost possibly impossible if you start actually knocking satellites and spaceships and who knows what else out of the sky. And the amount of damage, and we talked about this I think in the very last episode, the amount of damage that a mass driver given enough energy sent into a base anywhere on Earth, Moon, or anywhere else is cataclysmic, and it's the equivalent of nuclear without the fallout, at least. And it's just it's actually really scary for me to think about. So I think, do we need a space force with all of that I just said? I think absolutely. Just like war is scary, nobody wants to go to war, nobody wants to have a war. But if you don't have a military, you're more likely to actually be involved in a war and being on the losing side. If you have a big stick, people are less inclined to try and use their stick against you.
Deterrent. Yeah.
Sad but true.
What's that?
The counter argument to a space force, though, is the fact that many treaties right now prohibit weapons in space, and space to some people should be a peaceful domain where it's free of warfare. But there have definitely been violations of that over the years. Russia sent up a couple, weapon systems. One of them was called Polyus. I think it was 1990. They tried to launch that. Had all kinds of like guns and lasers on it. I think it failed launch, but I think unfortunately the human race is very tribal. Until we change how we are, which I don't think is going to happen anytime soon, we are going to have to protect ourselves from other actors. And right now our satellites are pretty vulnerable, and all of the GPS satellites, for example, power all of our financial transactions, among other things. So if those got knocked out somehow, it could really cripple the United States daily life for all of us. So I think it is important to have a space force overall. I don't think we're on the right track to actually build a real one. It seems like a lot of what's going on right now is just administrative bureaucracy forming a space force. They need a lot of technology development. I think the former NASA administrator, Mike Griffin, who's now the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisitions, is doing a really good job of trying to really think through how we're going to procure new systems and new technologies. And I think the core of what he's doing could be the future of a space force, where it's more effective to protect us from the bad actors of the world.
Mike, you got any thoughts?
No, I agree. Yeah, nobody wants fighting, but what's to keep a pariah in a rogue government to run up there and wipe away our footprints and like Greg said, start stripping the lunar landers and things like that. So yeah, you got to be prepared. You've got it. Worst case scenario. Again, how we get there, I don't know, but I would agree. Yes, you do need some reasonable protection for what you're going to do. And as far as the satellite situation, you saw the movie Gravity, and I know there was some Hollywood license there, but it's based on facts. So yeah, you gotta be able to protect yourself. Yeah.
If you look at our history as humans, and we have a fascinating history on planet Earth, but it's filled with war. I mean, that's just who we are. But it seems that if what has happened in our past will probably continue to happen in our future, is probably a pretty good bet. It seems as though that the only people in other countries of other beliefs, the only time they ever really get together and not war with each other is when they're partnering in something, when they're allied in something. I mean, we don't fight much like we did prior to 1776. We're not fighting Great Britain. And the reason we aren't is because we're a strong ally with Great Britain. And to be an ally with Russia and China and those countries that we could possibly be at war with is probably the only way that this is all going to work. And so this collective effort and international partnerships to go to the moon is probably going to be essential to ensure that the whole thing is successful and we stay away from a space war.
Yeah. Partnering in space among the nations could be a path to world peace as well. If we all are really strongly focused on space and all kinds of large space projects together, that would prevent a lot of other conflicts because it would be too important for us.
I know this much, that there's enough resources in space that the idea of scarcity and the scarcity mentality, and Dr. Zubrin himself talked about this on the last podcast, will go away for the foreseeable future if we can just get up there and actually start utilizing the resources that are up there. There's so much up there that, like you're talking about, just with the Helium-3 alone on just the moon, let alone all the other bodies that are up in just this solar system, there is an infinite amount of resources up there. Not an infinite, there is a finite amount, but effectively, the human race will grow to levels that a single planet could never possibly endure, and everybody will have every opportunity to have plenty. That the idea of scarcity will go away, and there's no reason why we can't have a much more positive future than some of the worst case scenarios that we're thinking about right now.
Yeah, it is pretty depressing, aren't we?
But I was watching Game of Thrones, and I'm not going to spoil it for anybody. I guess technically I'm going to spoil one little line, but it's not a main story plot, so I think everybody should be okay with it. One of the characters on there was talking about how to think about politics, and he goes, I think about every single scenario as happening at once. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a version of the many worlds theory, right? Mm-hmm. I think about they're all actually happening. So, this guy, he could be doing this or he could be doing that. Well, I think, okay, when he's doing both, if he's doing this, what am I going to do? If he's doing that, what am I going to do? And how can I make myself, politically come out on top if either one of those things happen? And so I think that's a little bit about what we're doing here, right? The ideal situation is, we put a new treaty in place. We do go to the moon. We do go to the Mars. We go to the asteroid belt. We go to Titan. We go to Alpha Centauri or Proxima Centauri, both, and beyond. And we literally inhabit the galaxy in a way that doesn't require war, that doesn't require conflict. There will probably be some conflict on the way if we're to be realistic about it, but we can minimize that, if not eliminate it, by focusing on that. But we also got to be prepared for the other part, because we are humans. Mm-hmm. We are just, as my guest on the last episode said, monkeys flinging our poo at each other in space. We have a lot of potential, and we have a lot to overcome, and we got to work on both ends of that to try and get to the best scenario. That's my take on it.
Agreed. Yeah.
Okay.
Here's to the future and less poop jokes.
You know what? I'm a 7-year-old at heart, so I'll never stop laughing at those. Okay, you can't make me. Okay, we're gonna move on to the next story. So and it's gonna fit right into what we've been talking about. I think. Amazon held its first Remars conference, a public version of its formerly private Mars conferences. MARS is an acronym for Machine Learning, Automation, Robotics, and Space. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos reiterated his stance that the future is in space. Pardon me. The reason we go to space, in my view, is to save the Earth. Bezos explained that heavy industry could be moved to the moon, taking advantage of abundant solar power and other resources, allowing for Earth to be rezoned to residential and non-polluting high-tech industry. Now, this is a lot of future casting, and we've done a lot of that just in our own personal conversation here. But that's the future that a billionaire with a lot of ability to actually help make that future reality is working towards. And not just the one guy, right? A whole bunch of people are working towards that. And you know, it's work talking about space. In one story, I get so pessimistic about our future, and then the very next story, and this would be one of them, I get really excited and inspired. I'm like, all right, let's do this. You know, I mean, what do you guys think?
So Jeff Bezos has been out saying similar stuff a lot. You heard some of these same comments if you watched the Blue Moon rollout a few weeks back. Very positive vision for the future. And I think it's great that he keeps repeating it, and it's resonating with folks. There's two possible futures for the human race if you look at it this way. Either we go out into space and have a future of abundance, or we never go out into space and we have a dystopian future where we're fighting over the scraps of what's left on Earth and killing each other and all that. So to me, that it's a no-brainer. And so let's just get going. Let's get out into space and get that future of abundance that we all deserve.
Respect.
I think it's, I think our future in space is inevitable. I think that as a human species, this is no different than when we sat on the shores in Spain hundreds of years ago and looked out over the horizon of the ocean and wondered what was on the other side. And that's just who we are as human beings. It's just that now that we have explored every corner of the planet, our ocean has gotten much bigger. And, exploring space is just the next logical step for humanity. I believe it's inevitable. We've got all these problems we're going to have to fix in order to get out there. Who's it going to be? Is it going to be Spain or England? Or, if you ever read the exploits of Captain Cook in the Pacific, I mean, that's what's going to happen. It's just going to be a different ocean. And so it's fun to speculate, but I don't believe that there's any question that this is where we're going to end up.
Agreed. Yeah. All I can say is, yeah, I absolutely agree. It's going to take international partnerships. As I stated earlier, one country can't do it alone. Sometimes I almost think I wish we had a giant asteroid heading toward Earth. We talk about that a lot. That could endanger the Earth. That could pull us all together and say, okay, let's fix this problem. But
give us 60 years to solve the problem, will you?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Plenty of time, but still we realize the issue. Sometimes I think that's only when we do pull together is when we have a common cause. But again, yeah, I absolutely agree with everyone else.
That'd make a really good book. You all are giving me some good book ideas.
Yeah.
Lucifer's Hammer by Jerry Pournelle. You'll read that. Oh boy.
Well, give us a brief synopsis, James. I've never heard of it.
That's a book where an asteroid does hit the Earth, and everyone has to pull together to, rebuild civilization. It's a very fascinating book.
Okay. My book would be a little bit more cheery, I think.
I think Arthur C. Clarke wrote a book. He called it The Hammer of God, I believe. I forget the title of the book, but he's my favorite guy out there. So he wrote some good stuff on that, too.
Yeah, one or two things. All right. NASA InSight has a new plan to get the mole moving again. as we covered over the last couple of episodes, the team working on it think that most likely the reason it's not making progress is due to a lack of friction, which is required for the probe to work with its hammering mechanism. Now, they plan to remove the upper portion of the instrument, which is in the way from them being able to actually see what's going on. The probe is not all the way in the ground, so it's sticking out, if it's my finger, it's sticking out maybe like that much, where most of it is under the ground, but a good portion of it is still above the ground. And so they're going to remove the cover over the probe very carefully because it's still got the wire that's connected to it, and they're going to move it out of the way. And then they're going to put the robotic arm that they have and push it down onto the soil right next to the probe hole, so that it hopefully will kind of act kind of like you pushing your hands down on the dirt next to a freshly planted plant. Provide more friction for that probe to be able to actually get down into the thing. And also, going about this option is going to give them just more information, so that if that's not actually the case, they'll at least still have some more information to make better decisions. So that's an exciting update on that they're moving to the next phase where they've studied the problem, I think, as good as they can, and so now they gotta work it a little bit, and that's what it's all about, right? Is problem solving, and
old-fashioned ingenuity, thinking on the fly there. Yeah, I read where the arm was actually inherited from a previous mission, so there's only so much they can do with it. And of course, you don't want to yank the probe all the way out because they won't be able to reinsert it. So I think the timeline is coming up by the end of June. They're going to start maneuvering, and then sometime in July or so. So in the next couple months, they should have a better assessment. And I also believe it's also canted at an angle, like 20-degree angle.
Yes.
Into the dirt. So whether that's a rock or something else, they don't know yet. But yeah, something to watch. But
yeah, they think it could have either hit a rock, or the soil itself is just not allowing the probe to get enough friction to go deeper.
It's too loose. It's
and that's
for lack of a better term, sandy.
Yeah.
From what I'd read, I'm sorry, no, from what I'd read, this is like the only place that we've been to where the soil is actually this loose. All the other probes that have landed, they found this nice compact soil, so reasonably they assumed that, well, it must be the same here. Well, lo and behold, it doesn't appear to be the case. So,
Mars is a big planet. There's all kinds of different types of terrain there. So
can I make a bit of a dig? That pun wasn't even intended.
Oh, too funny.
Oh man, too cheesy. Okay, no, but can I take a dig at the whole idea right quick? This is why we need humans, because they've been spending, and this is to take absolutely nothing away from the amazing team that's doing this work.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're doing stuff I could never hope to do. Okay, so. I really want to praise them and not make this seem like it's a dig at them personally. But this is why we need humans there, because a human could do in 15, maybe 30 minutes what has taken them months to do.
Absolutely.
And they would probably already have the problem figured out in that 15, 30 minutes and be moving on to the next thing.
Absolutely.
And
it's a really good point. I mean, human exploration, just imagine if we sent a geologist to Mars with a rock hammer, how much he or she would be able to discover in an afternoon, versus all the missions we've sent and all the limited exploration we've been able to do with robots. There's no comparison at all. And this problem they're having right now with InSight, if we had an astronaut there on site, the person could just lift up the probe and see what's going on and probably fix it. Whereas now they're having to test and retest here on Earth what they're actually going to do, so it doesn't disturb any of the equipment. And it's just a very long and cautious exercise they're doing, because we don't have anybody there.
What's the cost benefit analysis?
Well,
go ahead, Greg.
We don't have anybody there because we can't right now, and either we do the best we can with robotic probes, or we wait until humans go out there, which may be a long time. Take a look at Europa. I mean, we've got to go there. And I'm not trying to change the subject, but we're going to send robots there because humans aren't going to go there anytime soon.
Right.
And we've got to get down inside, past the ice and down inside that liquid water ocean at Europa or Titan. I mean, there's all of those are going to require robotic missions of some sort. And the only way to really get good, I believe, at creating autonomous, hopefully, robotic missions that are successful with difficult tasks are to just keep going and keep doing it and keep making big mistakes and then, and redesign and upgrade. Mars has been a great test bed for understanding difficult robotic missions that we're going to use in fantastic places like Europa and Titan and all of those places.
Enceladus, the moon of Saturn, as well as
we have to go.
Yeah.
We have to go, and we're not going to go with people. We're just not going to do that.
Well, your point's well taken, and I'm not suggesting that every single mission that we do has to be humans, and that we should stop sending robots until we are able to send humans. But I guess my point is that there should be a sense of urgency to get humans there.
True. Well, true, absolutely. I'm not sure. If a human mission in orbit around Jupiter is even practical because the radiation levels around that planet.
Right. And the Jupiter, the Jovian moons are a whole different prospect altogether. I think you make an excellent point there.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's like we were talking about doing a presentation in one of our Link Live presentations about Venus. And, about Earth's evil twin. And, it's doubtful that we ever send humans to the surface of Venus. What a fascinating place to go to, but it's horribly dangerous. And, to penetrate the atmosphere and get down to the surface.
What's the record, like 2 hours or something like that?
Oh, I don't know. That it lived, I think that was a Russian craft, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I remember seeing some pictures from the surface.
Yeah.
But it's like, 1,200 PSI, I forget what it is, and 900 degrees. And you have to go through 500-mile-an-hour horizontal winds of sulfuric acid or something to get down there. I mean, what a place. And so, we're going to have to, our robots are just going to have to get better and more autonomous. And the only way to do that is to send the InSight up to Mars and run into these problems and figure out how to make better machines. I think it's wonderful and exciting. I really do.
Yeah, well, I mean, like I said, I don't want to take away from the guys that are doing this job. If anything, they represent some of the most successful and inspiring parts of what NASA is doing. So
I do. I believe that JPL and those guys carried the torch since the end of Apollo 17, December of '72. When we really stopped exploring space with humans. Not to take anything away from the ISS and what they've accomplished, but the really exciting, immersive, inspirational exploration that we did with things like the Voyagers. Oh my gosh. And Cassini at Saturn and Juno at Jupiter, and certainly the Mars Curiosity rover. These guys at JPL and other places.
You're forgetting my favorite one.
Oh my gosh. My favorite one is the Voyager, because we put meshes in a bottle and sent it out into the cosmos. That's just my favorite. It's just got, it's almost romantic. I just love that.
It's kind of funny how we all have our favorite, right? And it's
mine's Mars Pathfinder. That's the one that really got the modern Mars exploration going, since 1999, or 97, yeah.
Yeah, and the movie The Martian made that famous again, so that was great.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely, that was great.
I remember I was watching The Martian, and I turned to my wife, because as soon as I saw him look at that map, I turned to my wife, I go, Pathfinder.
Pathfinder.
She looked at me quizzically because she didn't know what that was offhand. She remembers it, but she's not a space geek the way I was, and I was like, Pathfinder.
I remember watching that live as it was landing back in '96 or something like that. Yeah, very exciting. Yeah.
Me too. I was glued to C-SPAN in my dorm room in college. Yeah.
But it's.
I'm just going to make you all feel old.
Yeah, there's a word for relating human qualities to inanimate objects, and I forget what that word is, but it's we've been able to do that with those spacecraft, and certainly Pathfinder's like this this pet dog we set up we set up there, and everybody just loves it to death. And I feel that way about Voyager, and the whole pale blue dot with Carl Sagan. I mean, that whole thing, I think, inspired a whole nother generation of young people, not only in human exploration, but understanding the real value of STEM education is creating these robots that can do these enormously dangerous missions successfully in our absence. And I hope we continue on. And I believe that JPL picked up the torch and carried this whole space exploration excitement after Apollo. And they've been such an important part of our history. I love every one of those guys out there because they love what they do, and they have created some of the most fantastic machines ever.
Absolutely. Let me toss it away. I'm gonna actually do a little excerpt of Carl Sagan with his little talk about the pale blue dot real quick.
That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every teacher of morals, every corrupt politician, every superstar, every supreme leader, every saint and sinner in the history of our species lived there, on a mote of dust, suspended in a sunbeam. The Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors, so that in glory and triumph they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner. How frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from elsewhere to save us from ourselves. The Earth is the only world known so far to harbor life. There is nowhere else, at least in the near future, to which our species could migrate. Visit? Yes. Settle? Not yet. Like it or not, for the moment, the Earth is where we make our stand. It has been said that astronomy is a humbling and character-building experience. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known.
Yeah, I mean, listening to that, it's just Carl Sagan was a special guy in and of himself. In addition to all those people that you're talking about at JPL, which are fantastic. I mean, I can talk about so many different people that have inspired me. But growing up, he was one of the ones that got you when you were, like you talk about all the time, Mike, talking and educating kids and getting kids excited about it. When I was a kid, he's the one who got me excited.
Me too. Yep, me too.
And actually, you want to know what got my interest in space started? I've told this story, I think, before, but it was the Galileo spacecraft. You know, I was like 11, and I watched a Discovery Channel program about it, and now I'm doing a very space centric podcast, spending a lot of time and effort for zero money because of, in small part because of what they were doing with Galileo, which, you know, Galileo was pretty dang awesome, but the stuff that they're doing nowadays with these probes and the stuff that they were doing with Voyager, you know, is at least as, if not way more amazing. I mean, just this morning I saw the Juno spacecraft take a picture, and they found a new storm or something. They don't know if it's, I don't know if it's a storm or not, but they found a new something they called the Abyss informally on Jupiter, which is just really super dark, unusually dark black
I've seen that
spot on Jupiter.
I put it on my Facebook profile and got quite a few oohs and ahs. Yeah, it's just unbelievable.
You know, and that camera that took that picture was there just for social outreach. It wasn't even really
right. There's
a science instrument
no real
per se.
reason for it. In fact, as I recall, I think when you're talking about Voyager, they weren't even sure they wanted to put a camera on there. They just wanted to do the science, but it was people like Sagan who said, think of what this can do, just because we all learn visually. That's what inspires us to see these things and to see the rings of Saturn and all these new discoveries with your own eyes. That's really where it gets you. And with New Horizons, you were talking about New Horizons, to see what Pluto actually looks like. Is a camera necessary? Not really, but
absolutely.
It's just to see that it's a world now. It's not just a dot, a bright overexposed dot. It's a real world. Whether it's a planet or not a planet, doesn't matter.
It's a planet. We've talked about this.
We've solved that.
We've beaten that horse.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, you look at it. I mean, it's got mountains. It's probably got a subsurface ocean. It's got glaciers. I mean, it's such a cool looking place. It's got so many cool features to it.
Yeah.
It's not. I mean, yeah. Pluto has got a special place for me, and it's not has nothing to do with the fact that it was a planet. Now it's not a planet. It's just a cool place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. We're gonna move on to. Did I already? Yeah, I did that. Okay, we're gonna move on to honorable mention news. So this is what we call the lightning round. So we're gonna do pretty much the same thing we've been doing, but instead of talking for, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes about everything, we can say maybe a couple things. Sometimes it might diverge into a good enough conversation. If the conversation is good enough, we'll go with it. But we kind of just try and go through it so that everybody is informed, but we also have time to get to everything else. So, first story here, NASA human spaceflight director put doubt about funding of Artemis. So, Bill, and forgive me, I never do well with names, Gerstenmaier?
Yep, you got it.
Okay. Bill Gerstenmaier, I don't think we're going to be able to get the entire budget as new money. We're going to have to look for some efficiencies and make some cuts internal to the agency, and that's where it's going to be hard. Everybody can be on board with everything going forward, and as long as there's infinite, I am now paraphrasing, I'm butchering the reading, as long as there's infinite amount of new money coming in the agency. So, to re-say what he said much better than I butchered it, I apologize. It's basically, he thinks that we might need to be looking at efficiencies and cutting budgets on some other programs in order to make Artemis possible. Everybody's going to support the program when there's infinite amount of money, but unfortunately it doesn't look like that, especially with some of the politics going on with Congress and the administration and others. What do you guys think about that? Do you think that that's going to be a big stumbling block for the Artemis program? Do you think that NASA will be able to navigate this? I mean, I think they got a great administrator in Jim Bridenstine to be, if anybody could, it would be him. But do you think that they'll be able to navigate this political territory to get to the end goal there?
Yeah, it's always about the money, and We just, Congress, that's a tough nut to crack, and they obviously don't have the will, or else they just write the check. We don't have a shortage of money in this country. We do not. It's a shortage of ingenuity and will. That's what it's a shortage of. And we probably, maybe the best route to take is to have some international partners and have them up the ante a bit. I mean, ESA is building the command, like the service module part of the Orion stack. Maybe they just need to throw some more money into this. I mean, we've always footed the bill. We've put the bill in the ISS. Vast majority of the money for the International Space Station is the United States. And, we just need to go bring on some more partners. They need to put some money into this game so we can all get to the moon. And we need to make it interesting and profitable somehow for them to be able to do that. I just believe that if we're going to go looking for more money from Congress, we're going to the wrong place.
Yeah,
we should not put all of our eggs in one basket, and that's the problem with NASA. All that basket comes from Congress, and if they don't have the will to support it financially, we're out of business. That's one thing that SpaceX and Blue Origin, they don't have that problem. Mm-hmm. If they need more funding, they'll go get it. If NASA needs more funding, there's no place else to go. So we need to have international partnerships. That's the only influx of additional money beyond Congress.
So your way to solve this problem, because I put this exact same question to Dr. Zuber on the last episode, is, there's obviously the ideal engineering way to do this, and then there's the way that NASA is going to have to do it given the political constraints that it has. You think the best way to get it done is to bring in international partners with some skin in the game. Give them, we might have to give them a little bit something more in order for that to make it worth their while. But that's your take on how to solve this problem. How would that look?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you looked at Vice President Pence's the big announcement that he had made, I think it was at the National Space Council meeting just a few months ago. He said, make no mistake about this. We're going to launch American astronauts to the moon from America on American rockets. And I understand that's a very patriotic thing to do, and I'm behind him 100%. That closes the door on international participation, though. And, that statement is going to completely depend upon full funding from Congress. And so maybe we've gotten ourselves in a pickle here. I just think it needs to be more, space needs to be a global effort and not an American effort. I would argue that personally.
Agreed. Yeah, this is not America versus China or America versus Russia. We're going to need, it's a whole new world we're dealing with, and we're going to need to pool our resources. And like Greg said, unfortunately, NASA is beholden to the American taxpayer, whereas Jeff Bezos and Elon are not. So let's pool the best of what we have from each source, and let's go do it. And again, be efficient as well, because Gerstenmaier said, trying to be efficient with funding. You look at New Horizons. I mean, those guys put together this amazing probe at a fraction of the cost, this shoestring budget as opposed to what JPL had proposed, and they pulled it off, and it's still succeeding beyond our wildest dreams. So I think it can be done. I think you just got to be prudent in your spending and take it slow, take it steady. I mean, we all want to get there. I'm not all into the 5-year plan. Let's just do it, but let's do it right. And
what do y'all think about the architecture of the gateway and of the using the Orion and the SLS system, given the fact that is looking like it's overly it costs prohibitively expensive, particularly given all the things. Obviously, I think the reason why it's happening that way is political and not engineering wise. What do you guys think about that? Do you think that if we did exactly what you're talking about, Mike, and get it nice and efficient and clean and tight and done as strongly as possible, I absolutely think that's possible. But I don't think that could put NASA in more jeopardy with Congress and not less.
Yeah, I mean, I think SLS, as you said, has a ton of congressional support, a lot of allies, a lot of jobs relying on that. So again, there's the whole political atmosphere with SLS. I think it's designed. I mean, it's capable to go to Mars. I would say let's if we're going to go to Mars, let's use SLS and let's use other rockets, other means, less expensive means to get to the moon. That's my feeling. So, yeah.
Okay.
I agree with you. I agree with you, Mike, and that the whole thing, the SLS is being built in Huntsville, and the head of the Appropriations Committee is a senator from Alabama, so that that kind of all adds up. They're not going to use something built out of California, the Dragon Heavy as an example, which is possible. They have to make multiple launches. Here's my opinion. Let's bring
wait for it. Here it goes.
Let's bring the Saturn V out of mothballs and let that thing fly again.
They still have a couple.
There's mine waiting on top of my dresser there.
What a machine.
Yeah. I never got to see one fly. I want to see one fly again.
Let's do it again. It's a 1960s muscle car of a rocket. It's still the biggest and baddest ever built. Let's bring that. We got all the drawings and engineering prints. Let's bring it out of mothballs and fly that thing again.
I just I just bought the movie and I had watched it actually the day before I met Dr. Zubrin for the first time. Apollo 11, the movie or the documentary.
Yes, fantastic.
And talk about that. That was one of the coolest things I've ever seen because it more than any other, because I was nothing when Apollo was flying, right? I was born in the mid '80s, to give you an idea. So that put me as close as I think I'll ever get to feeling like I was there in the moment and what it would have been like to see that happen and what it meant to the people around there, because it showed so much, the people lining up along the coast and the parking lot of the grocery store and on that in the motels and everything, just waiting. There were so many people, and even Johnny Carson sitting there like, what's going on here? It was such a great shot, and then you got to see the rocket go up in a wide shot. It wasn't like one of those super Hollywoodized. Even Apollo 13 had a very Hollywoodized, very cool, but very Hollywoodized rocket launch, and this one was just, no, this is how you see all the rocket launches. Like it's real, something that's actually going up. It was not, just for pretend.
Unbelievable. The Saturn V shook the Earth. You could stand at the VIP section over by the VAB building where Launch Control Center was, and it was over 3 miles away. It shook the Earth over there. It was those F1 engines on the Saturn V burned.
Did you get to see one live?
I have not. I was in Houston. Okay. We were working Mode 1 abort at the Manned Spacecraft Center during those flights, and we had a chance to go. I mean, there were people in my office that went, and they had special, discounted prices for airlines to go and actually sit there. And I kind of wish that I would have gone maybe, but I got to be in mission control for the launch, so that was, we were doing Mode 1 aborts, all the Mode 1 abort data for pad aborts. So we needed to be there all through. I was T-minus 3 minutes, we were done with our stuff, but I don't regret not seeing that. But it was, that thing burned. Each of those F1 engine burned 750 gallons of fuel per second. It was unbelievable. I mean, collectively, those 5 engines would burn a swimming pool full of fuel every 5 seconds. It was absolutely, they exploded to life and shook the Earth. The fish would jump out of the ponds, next to the 39A when this thing would take off. And what a magnificent thing this was. I'm not sure why we're not flying it still.
Well, you got no objection here. I'll watch it fly again. I would shut up and take my money. I'll sign up and I'll be there.
Oh yeah.
All right. So, NASA opens International Space Station to new commercial opportunities and private astronauts, not tourists per se, but one of the main goals is to help reduce cost of transportation to low Earth orbit. and so they're going to open it up for profit manufacturing and profit-making activities for commercial companies. Activities must have a connection to NASA's mission or need the unique microgravity environment. So there are going to be criteria in order to go. You can't just say, hey, I'm really rich, here's a lot of money, let me go. The U.S. spacecraft must be used in the commercial crew program. Node 2 of Harmony module will also be made available for a to be able to dock a commercial destination. And then they're looking to have a free-floating commercial destination follow that docked destination eventually. And they want to stimulate the long-term sustainable demand of transportation to low Earth orbit. So this was all a really cool development. I watched the press conference that they held there with I think it was it in New York at the stock exchange, I believe, NASDAQ. They had a big NASDAQ podium there, but anyway, they were talking about how basically this is their outline. They've been working with commercial companies previously, but this is the first time that they're kind of changing the architecture to try and match what's currently going on the ground, and they've made it clear that they are open to suggestions. They want feedback from the commercial industry to say if this is their best idea of how to do it moving forward. If somebody says, well, you haven't thought about this, or that's not going to work for what we're trying to do over here, they're open to working with the commercial industry to modify it within reason to do what commerce needs it to do to really start making space a profit-producing activity. And I think this is a really cool development and a good step in moving forward.
How many would sign up for that? Well, I think what is it, 58 million to go up? I mean, somebody's got 58 million to go up there. So, yeah, like we've been talking about, use the commercial ventures out there. I mean, I think they would have a laundry list of groups that would sign up for that. So, yeah, again, you got to utilize what's out there and anything to cut costs. That's good. Yeah.
It's good to see NASA making these types of transitions to try to distance themselves and reduce their need to spend money on these legacy programs so that they can prepare for going back to the moon and onto Mars. And I think I definitely applaud them opening up the ISS. In my opinion, they should have done this a long time ago. But it's good that they're actually being systematic about some of the opportunities that they'll make available for companies and individuals to come to the ISS. I think it's great.
Yeah.
So is this the first step to a city of 1,000 planets?
It could be.
Have y'all seen that movie Valerian?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
With Luke Besson. So the city of 1,000 planets started out as the International Space Station in that movie. If you look at the beginning, I just watched it like yesterday or the day before with my son.
Check that out. Yeah.
And so it started off as the International Space Station, and then it grew, and it grew, and it grew, and then the first aliens met with humanity on the space station. That's where they made first contact, and then that even made it grow even more until it got too big, and they had to send it off into its own orbit around the galaxy because it was threatening Earth. If it had re-entered the atmosphere, so to speak, it would have just destroyed everything.
That sounds like V'ger.
Yeah.
Isn't that what happened to Voyager? Yeah, V'ger. Yeah.
V'ger. That's from Star Trek, I believe, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Star Trek 1.
Yep.
That was definitely a different Star Trek movie
Yes,
than the rest of them. Oh. Christy Alley. Ugh.
That was
talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, Christy Alley wasn't in the first one?
No, she wasn't. It was
it
was the lady that was bald.
Versus Kambata. Yeah, she played she was good.
That's right.
Yeah.
How do you know all this stuff, Mike?
Full of
But you never cease to amaze me.
I'm full of useless knowledge. Yes.
We'll go to you, Greg, when we want to know something actual about space. We'll go to Greg when we want to just know about the fiction stuff. I'm sorry, Mike.
No, it's okay.
The Royal Astronomical Society, of which our producer Lucinda Offer is a part, releases a statement on Starlink satellite constellation. Quote, We note that Elon Musk has responded, indicating he wishes to minimize the impact on astronomy. The Society welcomes this offer, but we urge SpaceX and other satellite providers to work with scientists, engineers, and others to mitigate the effects of the new constellations. We also ask they consider the impact on human heritage too, an issue that goes far beyond the concerns of the astronomical community. So this is basically the Astronomical Society, the Royal Astronomical Society. Their focus is on Earth-based observations of space, and the constellation of Starlink satellites, just the 60, let alone the proposed thousands that will eventually go up there, let alone the other companies that are also talking about putting thousands of satellites in their own constellations in low Earth orbit, are creating a lot of problems when it comes to being able to make observations from an Earth-based platform. And I think on one hand, I think that this will be mitigated. On the other hand, particularly as things move forward, this will become a bigger problem. I made a flippant comment on the last episode that, I think observations are going to have to migrate to outer space anyway. The far side of the moon and space telescopes and all kinds of things, and then we got into really talking about the L or the Lagrange oval, and putting a big array of satellites up there to make a huge telescope constellation. But for the now, I think that's still something that we need to be thinking about. What do you guys think about that? Anything?
Well, we're already building these gigantic telescopes in Chile and hopefully TMT on Mauna Kea. So I mean, the investment is there. I know Musk has said he wants to try to make the future Starlinks less reflective. And I've seen a few of these flying over my house, and I live in Indianapolis here, light polluted Indy, and I've seen a few of them flash here and there. I mean, it's cool, but once these things start spreading out, and eventually you have 12,000 of these things buzzing around like bees. I mean, as a stargazer myself, I mean, there's got to be, in my view, there's got to be a better way. I understand progress. I'm not against progress, but if there's maybe a way to make fewer of these more powerfully, so you don't need 12,000 of them buzzing around the globe all the time. Again, I don't know how you do that. I believe the life expectancy of these is only about 5 years, so that they can upgrade as technology changes. Again, what will go up to replace the current ones is another question altogether. Hopefully they can find a way. I think you're just going to have to find a balance. You've got to respect those who are here on Earth and who want to do the Earth-based observations here. But again, find a way to reach, to get this broadband to more remote areas. Hopefully they will strike a harmonious balance. I understand it's going to get crowded up there. So hopefully this is just the beginning, and we get the dialogue going, and we'll find a way to make these better and less visible and less intrusive.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder though. I think it's a bit like somebody putting a big building that you might not want in your because it's going to obstruct the view from your piece of property. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, I think progress is going to be made, and I think I think in the long term, it's probably going to be a losing battle. I think eventually we do need to look towards migrating our observatories off the planet. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking long term, not like in the next 10 or even 20 years, but like 50, 100 years. So that's just going to be a natural consequence of all the progress that we're making in space. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure that there's much to be done about it except not do it. And I think not doing it would be worse. Mm-hmm. A worst case scenario. So if there had to be a mutually exclusive, one wins over the other. That's my take on it.
There's solutions to that kind of thing. I think if we would work, again, internationally and come up with some international laws or regulations about the use of orbital space, that countries could lease time, as an example, along particular orbital paths, and they have a 5-year lease. After that 5-year lease, it is mandated that they deorbit that spacecraft and burn it up over the Pacific. So it's not an accumulative problem. At least we can manage the overall numbers by getting all the old stuff out of orbit. Earth orbit is self-cleaning. I mean, if we would just stop launching stuff right now, eventually everything would fall in. Even the geocentric or the geosynchronous orbits would eventually fall in. But we just need to better manage it. There's countries out there that'll launch things, and after the technology is used up or they become not functioning anymore, they're still in orbit and they'll stay out there forever. They need to deorbit that stuff and get it in. That needs to be the law.
Agreed.
Or we're going to have a huge traffic jam up there.
No, and
it's going to be dangerous to even try and get through it eventually.
I think that it's less. I'm less worried about. Me personally, I've got enough trust in Elon Musk and his folks that they will do their best to do what's right. But I think you're right that not everybody's going to be as not everybody's going to want to be as good a steward, and so we do need to definitely work on making sure that we as a society are good stewards for.
Well, look at last year, China had a remnants of their space station, I believe, that was going to fall in, and nobody really knew where the impact area was going to be. If you remember that, it might have been 2 years ago. And, they said they lost contact with it. They didn't have enough fuel to deorbit it.
Yeah, I remember.
At a specific location. Well, that's criminal as far as I'm concerned. We need to be responsible if we're going to be flying over the people's countries. We need to have term limits up there, and they need to reserve enough fuel and have the capacity to deorbit that in a specific spot so that we can burn them up over the ocean where they're not going to fall on somebody's city. And that to me that shows how totally irresponsible countries can be when it comes to large orbiting craft. Something needs to be done about that.
So something, to put it simplistically, kind of like getting your car inspected. You can't drive your car if it doesn't have the capability of being on the road.
Well, sure. I mean, because
to put something in orbit, you got to have the capability of dealing with it appropriately.
Have something the size of, that's 30 or 40 feet long and it doesn't burn up completely and it lands in the middle of Chicago. I mean, you get a real problem. That kind of stuff starts wars. And we have to understand that and be able to manage that before something like that happens.
Agreed. Okay, moving on to something a little bit less serious. Ad Astra movie releases its new trailer. The synopsis is basically astronaut Roy McBride, which is played by Brad Pitt, travels to the outer edges of the solar system to find his missing father and unravel a mystery that threatens the survival of our planet. His journey will uncover secrets that challenge the nature of human existence and our place in the cosmos. It looks like it's visually trying to be a very hard sci-fi. The co-writer and director of the movie, James Gray, is quoted as saying he wanted to feature the most realistic depiction of space travel that's been put into a movie. But then I saw the Moon Rover Cavalry Charge, and I was like, I don't know about that. I mean, we did get Interstellar, we did get The Martian. Those were pretty realistic, though they both had their big issues. This one seems like it's going to be a little bit more fanciful than even those two.
Yeah, at some point you gotta make it entertaining. I understand that. And with the cavalry charge you were talking about, I think I saw them shooting lasers at each other, and I thought, now wait a minute, that's a little too sterile.
Well, and the moon rovers are going like 70 miles an hour and bouncing like they would here on Earth.
Yeah. So
you hit one bump and that moon rover's going into orbit of the moon.
Yeah. Well, I saw Tommy Lee Jones plays Brad Pitt's father, so I love Tommy Lee.
No, I'm sure there's some wonderful acting and some great drama going on.
Yeah.
I'm just hoping it's not another Armageddon movie.
Yeah.
Well said. I'll be in line to see it, but I'm hoping it's not like Armageddon.
And my question is, when are they going to make a movie out of Rendezvous with Rama?
That would
I
be a
mean,
good one.
that was the best book ever written, ever.
Yeah.
There's a lot of books that they need to make into movies, I think.
Well, I'm still waiting for the follow-up movie to Andy Weir's next book, Artemis.
Yeah.
Have you guys
They
heard
are-
of it?
They are, yeah, that's a great book. They are working on the movie. It's, yeah, I'm really looking forward to that as well. That was an excellent story.
Oh, absolutely, I agree.
And in that story, we were talking about saving the Apollo 11 site and the other sites. That's what they did in the Artemis base. They have a enclosed by a dome, and it's a tourist center that you could take a shuttle, kind of a subway train to. It's away from the real city, which has domes named after Aldrin, Armstrong, Collins. Yeah, it's Shepard. Yeah, it's a great story.
Yeah, I can't wait for that one. But I'll give Ad Astra a shot. I'll watch it.
Well, you can avoid the X-Men Dark Phoenix if that's what you're looking for. I just saw that over the weekend, and not to spoil anything, but the opening of the movie, there's a space shuttle in 1992. It's I think they showed Endeavour. It was a space shuttle Endeavour launched, and they had a problem up in space, and so that they don't know what to do, so they have to call the X-Men to go and save them. And so they get in their jet, which goes up into space. And they use storm to freeze holes in the space shuttle that's spinning out of control. And I'm sitting here going, because space isn't cold enough as it is. It was just like for somebody that knows anything about how space works, like everything they could have gotten wrong, they did. And I don't mind. I'm not going to watch X-Men because I'm looking for super hyper realism. Mm-hmm. But there is a bit of suspension of belief, Like when I look at Iron Man, I know that in real life, a man in a suit like that is probably going to die from the G-forces alone if he tried to do some of the things that Iron Man actually does. But there's enough suspension of belief there that, hey, they got control surfaces and, they're at least thinking about, trying to make it look real. And it was just
another missed opportunity by Hollywood, unfortunately. Yeah,
indeed. So come on, Hollywood, do the good stuff. Stop doing the bad stuff.
Yeah.
That's just my take.
Yeah.
Like they're gonna listen to me anyway.
Well, if they put Gwyneth Paltrow in there, then it's okay with me.
Well, she did get to wear some armor, so
yeah, that's
good on her.
Yes.
All right. Solid Fueled Long March 11, our Chinese rocket, launched from the Yellow Sea on an ocean platform. I think this is a bigger story than the play that it's getting right now. So they were able to launch from an ocean platform, which means that they can launch pretty much anywhere latitude-wise that they need to. They can do an equatorial launch, or they can do a polar launch, or at least much more so. I think that's a kind of a big deal. A big capability that not many others have. I think, James, you talked about the Russians having a ship like that at one point.
Yeah, the Sea Launch ship that was recently purchased by a Russian company. It's docked in Long Beach, California right now, but going to be moved to Russia to refit. That it's a similar thing that China did, is they launched this rocket from an ocean platform, and that gives you a lot of advantages. If you can launch near the equator, you get an extra boost from that. So yeah, it's definitely interesting that they're doing that type of activity.
And this just shows how China is really coming into their own, and the fact that
they're not really where the United States space program is, but they are moving at a faster clip, and if we don't start running, they're going to go right by us and catch us flat-footed.
Yep.
They're going to lap us. Yep.
Maybe that's what we need.
That's what
I don't have a problem with China doing this, and if it lights a fire under us, I think that's a good thing. But it's happening, and so we need it. That means we need to get our stuff in order.
I tell you, and you guys, none of you guys were born back in the day, but Apollo 11. I was a senior in high school, just graduated in 1957. I was 6 years old. Sputnik started it all, and that was the Russians. This whole thing started because of the advances of our adversaries in space flight. And that was the only thing that motivated us to finally end up on the moon. If it had not been for the Russians, the Soviet Union, we would have never gone. And so it could very well be it's going to take the Chinese to move us once again to make spectacular moves in space.
Yep.
Yeah. I feel like we're watching King of the Hill back. We're back in Dallas drinking our beer in the alley.
Yep. Yep.
LSST construction photo posted by Michelle Bannister, which looks pretty cool and exciting. The LSST is a large telescope, as the name would suggest. And it's just really cool to see it. And the dome is being constructed. And then you see this other dome over to the side, which is a huge telescope in and of itself, but it looks downright tiny. So, to the point earlier with the SpaceX, there is a lot of investment still going on in space telescopes. And a lot of ground-based telescopes can still do some really cool science that we just don't have the capability in space to do for quite some time to come.
That thing's going to be able to do near-Earth asteroid research. It's going to be able to look deep space. I know they're going to look at the Kuiper Belt as well. It's just amazing that it's not just going to be focused on deep space or near Earth. It's going to do everything. My understanding is so. And the amount of data they're going to be downloading is just off the charts. I mean, it's almost too much for people to even process. So my understanding is they're going to start making the data available like almost immediately for people to process and examine. So that's
the other cool thing about today is a lot of democratization, like all those photos from Juno too. I mean,
oh yeah, citizen science. Yeah,
I love it.
We're all about it. Yeah.
Okay, NASA is about to do the Orion launch abort test. That's upcoming, so we wanted to make sure to mention that. They got a picture of it at the test site, so we do hope that goes well. There's been plenty of criticism on this podcast for the Orion system and SLS and all that, but at the same time, we do root for them, and we do hope that everything goes well with that.
That's early July, I believe, isn't it?
Yeah,
I know they.
I don't have the date at the moment. I don't know if it was. I don't think it was available when I put the story on. If it is available now, I'll make sure to put it in written form on the podcast, and I'll of course have a link in on our blog post for those that are listening. Okay, Bigelow Aerospace tweeted out a photo of a model of their suggestion for first base, is what they call it, which is said to accommodate 4 people for a long duration or 6 people for 120 days mission on the moon. The habitat interior would be 330 cubic meters, plus the whatever space you get in 2 airlocks. It was pretty cool. It looked like 4 cylinders put horizontally, and then one of the big expandable cylinders in the center hub, and then 2 airlocks holding the 4 cylinders to the main big one. Looks like something that I've seen lots of times in Kerbal Space Program, but made real. And it's still not quite real, but I look forward to seeing something like that hanging out on the moon where you can go and visit.
And again, that speaks to the efficiency of cost. I mean, do you need a really rigid structure, or can you just have basically a fancy balloon that can protect you, but yet at a fraction of the cost? So
my question with that habitat would be, is there going to be a worry about radiation any more so than you would have on like the ISS, and would they maybe eventually do something like cover it up with regolith or something? They had what they showed is they had solar panels on top of the 4 rigid cylinders, but I don't know if that would be enough power long term, or if you're going to. I hear a lot of people talking about that. No, eventually you're going to need to get a nuclear power, or if we get it figured out, get that H3 going on a fusion power, something like that, because the solar power just is not going to be enough for the power requirements for some of the larger scale manufacturing that we're going to want to do there. But
although on the moon there are portions that are permanently in sunlight, so you would have 24-hour a day generation of solar power as long as you have enough.
You just
batteries
need a
to
large
store
enough
it.
array.
Yeah, you just need a large enough array and enough batteries to store it, and you should have all the power you need. But to answer your question, Chris, about the Bigelow Aerospace pressurized habitats versus a normal aluminum, they've actually done a lot of testing already of these. They had a module.
I know they had a module go out to the ISS, right?
Yeah, so it shouldn't be a concern to have for there to be lack of radiation protection. You also could bury them underground as well. So it's definitely, I think, something we'll use when we get to the moon. And like I was saying earlier in the podcast today, if we just had a contest between SpaceX and Blue Origin to launch one of these things to the moon, it would save a lot of money from NASA's current plan.
Just do like an X Prize type thing?
Exactly.
Well, I think there really is already a contest. There's an unspoken one. I mean, who wouldn't not want to be the first one on the moon? I mean, I know Jeff and Elon are both very cognizant of that. So even though they're having these current operations going right now, I'm sure underneath there's quite a bit of thought going into that. So, yeah.
Well, but I think what James is suggesting, and just to push it even further than it already is going, and I think you're right there too, Mike, not to discount your point, is have a stated prize by NASA that let NASA use its role to say, okay, we will help and assist. We'll give you access to our resources to get this goal done, and then whoever gets there first wins this money, right? And so then you're only spending money for a program that is successful because you're not outputting the money until it's a successful program. And I think that's not a bad idea. I mean, that's kind of what they're doing with the power propulsion module for the Gateway, right? They hire the company. The company is going to build it. They're going to get it launched. They're going to put it in orbit, and they're going to make sure it's operational, and then they give it to NASA, which I really like that is the way that they're doing it. If they're going to do a Gateway, that's the better way to do it, I would say.
Yeah.
Then here you go. Hope the launch goes well. Good luck with it.
So, Chris, I am going to need to drop here for my meeting with my day job. All right, guys, thanks a lot. It was really nice talking to you this morning. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. Good to see you.
See you later, James.
Thanks. Bye.
NASA shuts down the International Cosmic Ray Instrument due to petty interpersonal politics. And that's my characterization of it, because factually that's really what it is. Yeah. The NASA guy told the university researchers how to do the data, but they asked they liked what he did, but they wanted more data that he wasn't providing them on, like the orientation and things like that. And he said it wasn't necessary, so they got into a tiff about that. And so then they got an ultimatum eventually from NASA to remove the existing principal investigator from South Korea and put the guy that they were having the tiff with as the new principal investigator. And the universe is like, look, we'll remove this person, but we're not having that person. And so the university said no, and well, that was that. They shut the program down, and all this science that could have been done is now, not happening. And this is by no means, I think, indicative of everything that goes on, but it was a little frustrating to read that story. It's not a big, huge part of what we're trying to do, but it is still, a little frustrating to hear.
I'm not that familiar with the story. I've heard a few things about it, but I think it just shows the human factor that constantly has to be dealt with when trying to explore. So, there's that whole human thing. Yeah, we love humans, but they have egos and personalities and hurt feelings too. So, yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. Egos can be a good thing, but man, can they be a bad thing?
Be a bad thing. Yeah.
Okay, so another story about shutting down. This one less frustrating, I think. NASA is shutting down the Spitzer Space Telescope early next year. It has been costing about $11 million per year to operate and is being replaced by missions such as the currently operating test mission, as well as the upcoming James Webb Space Telescope. So they have a plan to replace the capabilities that are being taken away. They did want to extend it beyond, but it was on they have a list of priority missions that they need to fund, and that one was just at the bottom, and it just didn't quite make it. They did put a search for private funding, but they were unable to come up with that private funding. It did go 10 years past its original mission, which was only slated to be 6 years. So I'd say that that's pretty successful. They sought, I already read that part. And then, I just wanted to give a farewell to that mission because that was a pretty important piece of technology we had in orbit. It did more for finding exoplanets and infrared astronomy. It did so much for us, and we really did a lot of great stuff with that mission. So congratulations to the team for all the great work that they did while they were working on it, and we say farewell to a very fantastic mission.
Yeah, agreed. It certainly took a backseat to Hubble because it wasn't as glamorous, but it certainly did its role.
Yeah, Hubble is what we see with our own eyes. It's in the right vision spectrum, the light spectrum for us, but there are other light spectrums, and we can do cool things with them that we can't do with things like Hubble.
Correct. Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to James Webb when it finally does get up there, and I'm really crossing my fingers that it works. It is a big, really complicated thing, so I don't mind that they're taking the time to make sure it gets right here on the ground.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, it's frustrating to watch, but you don't get a shot to go up there and fix it. So, yeah.
Yeah. Because they're sending it to the L3?
Range point, beyond the moon.
It's the L3 one?
Whatever beyond the moon one.
Yeah. So L1 is between the moon and the Earth. L4 and 5 are where the Trojan asteroids would be in a
They're 60 degrees off either side.
Yeah.
Right.
And so the L3, I think, is the one, and then
the one there's
another one that's on the other side of the Earth, right? So
correct.
Anyway, all right, we'll put a diagram up, and it'll be much better than what my hand motions do. Okay, so that's it for the lightning round, which wasn't too lightning, but that's okay. We still had a lot of fun, right? Mm-hmm. What we're going to talk about next, guys, is we want to talk about what you guys do there at the Link Observatory. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? What do y'all do? What's the mission? And have y'all had any great accomplishments? I'm sure that you have. And do you have any great plans for the future?
Take it, Greg. And you better be comfortable, Christopher, because he's going to talk.
Yeah, I know. Mike knows me too well. No,
we didn't have you come on just to look pretty, man. I know you do, but
I know. I'll try and keep it short and below 3 hours because we need to get out of here for dinner tonight. But we started, and I'll be brief. But we started. It all started, I believe, for me. I'm the original founder. It all started for me back in the days when I worked for NASA, and it just gets in your blood and stays there forever, it seems. And
you had been outside of the space industry for a while. Is that correct?
Say again.
You had been outside of the space industry for a while. Is that correct?
Oh, ever since. I mean, I left in December of 1972. I was at as soon as Apollo 17 lifted off the lunar surface. I was out of a job, and we could have stayed around probably for the shuttle, but the shuttle didn't fly till 81 or 82. That was another 10 years away. And there were some other missions, like Apollo Soyuz, et cetera, but Skylab. But I was there to put people on the moon. That was my dream in life, and we did that. So it was time to leave. But of course, I was in private industry in a variety of positions for many, many decades. And then in the 2008 or 9, I believe, I came across the Link Observatory, and it's owned. It was built in 1939 by Dr. Goethe Link. He was a famous Indianapolis surgeon, wealthy, had a summer home southwest of Indianapolis proper, up on a hilltop. He was a surgeon by day and an astronomer by night. He was just very serious amateur astronomer, and decided to build his own observatory. He had the money to do so. When it was built, it was the, I believe, 8th largest in the country. And of the top 10, it was the only one privately owned. It was designed as a kind of a downscaled version of the Palomar Observatory in Temecula, California, which was being built at the same time. Saw first light in 1939, used for his purposes until 1948. It was given to Indiana University Department of Astronomy. They used it for astrophysics for the next 40 years until 1988. And then, of course, the internet was becoming available. It was becoming you're able to operate remotely, on mountaintops, remotely operate large observatories. And so they went on and built some at Kitt Peak in Tucson, Arizona, a large observatory with Yale called the Wynn Observatory down there. And they retired this from science. And the Indiana Astronomical Society became the group that were involved in light maintenance. Yeah, the custodians, so to speak, and they kept it in great shape. In 2012, I founded the Link Observatory Space Science Institute, which is now Link Institute. But the whole idea was to bring that observatory, allow it to unlock the gates basically, and allow the general public to come out and schools to come out in field trips and really share the wonders of the universe. It's a spectacular place. An old telescope with old drive system, but still it was, observatories are special places.
Does it
it's
have
a
an
36
eyepiece,
inch,
or is it all done digitally?
Oh no, this is all a traditional old style telescope with a clock drive, a polar mount, eyepieces, very little electronics at all. It was an old Model A of a telescope, but just spectacular. 1939, a very historic place, and everybody loves this place. And so we decided to go to Indiana University Department of Astronomy and talk to them about some type of an arrangement where we could do an annual lease and engage the public and students in STEM education. And they thought it was a wonderful idea. So we opened it up to the public, and soon just became overwhelmed. And so from 2012 until 2014, our main goal was to develop public programs. All of us worked for a living at the time, so we're all part-time. We started bringing on team members. Mike was, I met Mike through the Indiana Astronomical Society, which is a local astronomy club. And Mike came on as our director of public engagement. He's an expert at the night sky and astronomy. He's an expert, certainly much more so than I. And we became very successful at our public programs. We were just overwhelmed. We had more people than we could handle. And so starting in 2014, we started to develop our STEM education programs for students, and kind of reinvented daytime astronomy, because realizing that students, fifth graders, aren't going to come out at midnight, to do stargazing through a big telescope. And so we purchased through the various grants, et cetera, we purchased hydrogen alpha solar telescopes and really kind of reinvented daytime astronomy, became very successful at that. And
that's cool.
Yeah, we had, and that grew, and we started to create digitally delivered STEM education programs in connection with science directly to classroom technology. Started off with 1,000 students as a kind of a test bed, and grew it to 25,000 students on our STEM education programs.
Wow.
Digitally delivered, on demand, cloud-based. We created all this ourselves. It's very scalable. Started to do stuff out of state, et cetera, to kind of prove its worthiness as far as more remote locations. And I think last year we had over 50,000 people in our programs, in public programs, and over 25,000 students in our STEM education programs. And so we have some projects that we're developing now large-scale construction that we have not made public and will not make public at this time, simply because
I was looking for the scoop.
well, we're in a capital campaign right now, and you kind of have to gauge the rollout of that publicly. But it involves, a major site as far as a observatory and space science center here in central Indiana, and we feel we'll be very successful. We're looking forward to 1 million people a year visiting us, and
Wow.
that's just where we stay. It all, I believe, and I think Mike will agree with this. It all has to do with our vision and inspiration, and our belief that space exploration is a vital part of humanity, and that if, as long as you take action, one thing will always lead to another. And so, from our humble beginnings and having 6 people show up at our first lecture, to opening a center where we expect 1 million people a year from all over the country to visit us, and doing that in less than a decade, we feel is a testament to the leadership that we've been able to bring on board. Mike certainly has done a fantastic job in public engagement and people's fascination with space exploration. We do believe that the next space race is on, that it will become a vital and inspirational part of our education system, that we can attract the attention and the heart of young people, our next generation, by using space exploration as a way to help them become interested in pursuing careers in science and technology, which our nation desperately needs. We're way behind the curve now. There are so many countries ahead of us in those technologies. In order to keep from becoming irrelevant on this planet, we as a country need to help our young people become more engaged in pursuing those careers and keeping America in a leadership role in science and technology. That's what we're all about. So that's our story. There's 1,000 details. I'll let Mike take it from here. Sorry about that, Mike. I got done in only 15 minutes. That's pretty.
I know you're doing pretty good. Wow. Yeah.
That's pretty good.
I just wanted to talk about, we focus so much on the kids, and we've met so many great kids through our public presentations, through our educational presentations. We met a young lady named Cora, who lives not far from the observatory, the Link Observatory. She lives in a little town, and she wanted to apply to go to a program called Sister. It's a program out at Goddard Space Flight Center for geared toward middle school aged young ladies who want to get involved in STEM education. And Cora wanted to go, and you had to have good grades. You had to write a letter why you think you're worthy of going, and then you needed a science representative, somebody to write a letter recommendation. And Greg wrote her a recommendation on behalf of the Link Institute, and she was chosen to go to this very prestigious educational program out at Goddard. And we interviewed her after she got back, and there were 200 people at this big presentation, and she's sitting up there with me, a little 12-year-old young lady, but boy, you could feel the confidence coming on as she got started talking about this. She was the only representative from the Midwest who got to go to Goddard to this program. I asked her how many other people were there, and she said most of them were from the East Coast, some were from Texas, a couple from California, but she was the only one from the Midwest who got to go, and we were so proud of her for that. And we met a young man named Will, who we met him when he was like 8 years old. He was like, knee high to a grasshopper. Now he's taller than his mom, and he's getting bigger, and he's talking about black holes and pulsars, and he's winning championships at his 4-H fair competitions, and he's been on TV talking about his interest in space. And we've just met so many young people through this. I'm so proud of every single one of them. And some of them have told us they are going to be the first person to walk on Mars, and I would not bet against them. So it's so gratifying to meet these kids.
I think that guy goes to my son's school. He told me.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. There's a lot of them out there, but
right.
Yeah, but there's so many great kids that we've met through the Link Institute. We're so proud of what we've done, and we're focused on the future, because for old people like us, it's too late. But we can sort of kindle that spark in the minds of these young people. And like in our educational system, they only have so many outlets. The teachers only have so much time to teach what they have to teach. We give them that extra boost as far as STEM education, and they love us, and we love them. We're very proud of them, and we can't wait to see what they're going to do. You were talking about a proud accomplishment we had. We took 5 busloads of people down to Kentucky to see the solar eclipse a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And, that was a crazy day. Boy, that was a long, wild day. It started at 4 a.m. and didn't end until we pulled back into into Indianapolis at 11. But boy, we barely made it down there for 2.5 minutes, and 150 people got to see the most spectacular astronomical event they will ever see in their lives. And we even had one of the news stations follow along with us.
Oh, wow.
And it was a fun time, and we got tremendous exposure for it. So that's one of our great accomplishments, but we've got many more in store.
Yeah, I just took me and my family.
Yeah.
My father was visiting some of his wife's family up in somewhere in Illinois, not Chicago, but up near Chicago area. And so I got him to drive over too, and we all met up in Missouri and got to see it. And I bought the solar filter for my camera, and I took a great photo. Here it is, and all this stuff. And it really was a really, really spectacular, cool event. And we had clouds. I was a little disappointed because we had to drive last minute 100 miles or so to get out of cloud cover because we were originally going to watch it in St. Louis. No, not St. Louis, Kansas City.
Okay.
So we drove towards St. Louis from Kansas City, got halfway there, and then we were able to finally see, okay, there were some clouds, but it was better. But what a great event.
Yeah.
Now, enough about me, though. I digress because it's not all about me. It's all about you guys. So the Link Observatory, it sounds really cool when it comes to like really inspiring young people and giving them good opportunities to branch out into the science area. What are your plans for the future? What do you think you guys are hoping to do? I know you have that one thing that you were talking about that you don't really want to talk about yet because it's too early. Do you have anything else going on that you can talk about?
Well, both Mike and I will take this, I guess, but we could continue to try and expand our influence. We have a variety of both public engagement and education programs, and public engagement for us has been very successful. We had about 3 years ago, I guess, we created a virtual reality exhibit. I mean, we were looking for what do you do when you are an observatory? I mean, we were not just involved in astronomy. We're involved in astronomy and space exploration, NASA missions, astronomy and space exploration. We really
you should have had James on here. He does MarsVR. He's going to talk about that later in the episode.
Yeah, MarsVR?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we started back before people knew what VR was. This is probably 3 years ago.
Oh, wow.
The Google Cardboard had just become available. And so we decided we needed an exhibit because we'd been asked by other venues in town, museums and those types of things, if we would maybe bring telescopes out or whatever. That's pretty boring, really. I mean, people look at a telescope, but if it's not nighttime, you can't look through it. And so we created this VR exhibit that became a huge hit. And we'd have 50 people deep in the lines, waiting to try this VR headset on. And we had limited stuff to look through, but that grew into an educational product for us. Our Link Live programs, which are much like TED Talks, are literally standing room only, and it's a very high level production, embedded videos and music, and it's a whole production type thing we do. And we're Apollo 11, the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11 is, my guess will be by the time that's over, we'll have done at least 60 of those presentations. We've done almost 400 presentations since we began in 2012. So we've done a bunch of venues with that, and that's a bunch. But we've been invited to come to Purdue University on July the 20th, which is, of course, the 50th anniversary day. We're going to be there for 3 days, the 18th, 19th, and 20th, and we'll be involved in that program. Purdue expects about 25,000 people there, a large variety of astronauts. Gene Kranz from original Apollo Mission Control will be there. He's in his 90s. I don't know if Buzz Aldrin will be there, but he may. But it'll be a big event. We're honored to be a part of it. And so those are some of the things that we're doing right now. Mike, go ahead and take it from there.
No, really, I think just to expand our offerings and to get out. Currently, we're really focused on Central Indiana, but we really want to go nationwide eventually.
So if I wanted to have you guys engage with like my son's school, for example, he's in elementary school. How would that work? What would we need to do, or how would my son's school, or how would you guys engage with the school, or how would that work?
Well, we focus on grades 4 to 12. Okay. We found that when you get into the elementary, that's a whole different thing. You need, and I'm not trying to make this sound goofy, but when you get down to first, second, third grade, it needs to be kind of a cartoon type of educational thing, just to make it interesting and engaging for the kids. And that's just not us. And so we use a lot of NASA materials from the 5 major centers: Kennedy, Goddard, Marshall, Johnson, and JPL. And so we use their videos and their engineers to do the teaching in the classroom. And then we deliver it digitally and have educator workshops where that's available. The costs are low. Of course, there's a cost to it, but we can deliver that for $10 per student for the entire school year. So it's less than a textbook. That's about $1 per student per month. And so if your school wants to be engaged in that, we can send demos out.
They have 4th and 5th graders, so.
Yeah, we can send a demo out to have them take a look at it. They can make contact. We can do everything remotely, and then give them remote access to our system after going through an agreement process. And they can bring that in. It's on demand, and our science programs are absolutely spectacular. Where Mike had talked a bit about citizen science. I think you should more, Mike, because citizen science to us is a fantastic opportunity to engage students in real NASA science. Packaged programs so that they can really get engaged. Some hard stuff. We believe it needs to be hard stuff because that's what really makes it challenging for the students. But take it from there, Mike. Some of these programs are fantastic.
Yeah, kids can examine the surface of Mars for new features, craters. Again, with all the data coming down, there's almost too much. And so they actually need everyday people to look at this. They need students. They need the help. So with these educational programs, kids can look at orbiting satellites. They can examine the moon for new craters, things like that. The deep sky surveys that'll be done by LSST, they're going to need that data done. So our educational programs offer that type of access for these kids. And it's, again, like Greg said, it's something that the teacher can download directly to their laptop, to their computer right in their classroom. And they watch a video, and then they do a little discussion, and then just get the ball rolling and get them interested. So that's basically
that sounds really cool.
Yeah.
This might need to be more than just a hypothetical conversation about how they would do it. We might need to get my kid's school to I have a bit of a rapport and relationship with the administration there, so we might have to get them talking with you guys.
Yeah, well, sure, and certainly we've got plenty of materials to get out to them so they can fully understand the not only the content but the impact it could make, and be engaging. I guess our motto and our mission is something different, but our motto is we bring NASA into the classroom and allow that direct connection between students and NASA. NASA does a wonderful job of creating science programs and educational programs, but they don't proactively go to the market and talk to schools directly. They typically will put it out on their website and say, well, here it is, have at it. And nobody knows where it's at or what it's all about because that's as far as they carry it. It's kind of almost like that, a typical government program. We have great government programs that nobody knows anything about. They don't even know they exist, And so what we have done is we have taken those programs, created our own, packaged all of that together, and then we proactively penetrate school systems and say, hey, look, this is what you can have that we have a value add to that, which is our fee. But let's put all this together and really get students engaged with doing real NASA science, and help support their enthusiasm for science and technology. That's what we do.
Love it. Awesome, guys. Well, I think that's it. Besides going into some of the stuff we'll go into with James later, is there anything else that you guys would like to cover, talk about, or discuss?
Oh gosh, yeah. There's all kinds. I can talk about this stuff all the time, but I always tell people, when we talk to the kids at some of our programs, we say, kids, we're hitting the golden age. We're hitting another golden age where between the new rockets we're building with, not just with NASA, but with SpaceX and Blue Origin, and then the new telescopes we're building, the new technology we're gaining, the fact that we just imaged a black hole for the very first time. I mean, that just blew my mind. Everybody, yeah. I mean, 53 million light years away, and there it is, clear as a bell. So that's one of the things we really tell people is this is coming. This is real. This is going to hit you whether you're ready or not. So you might as well be ready, and that's what we're trying to do. So yeah.
I imagine that by the time my son, who's 7 years old, by the time he's an adult, 18, 20 years old, if you can call that an adult, they technically are, right?
Yeah.
Not to... I feel like I'm going to get a lot of hate mail from
no.
18, 20-year-olds now. But, by the time he's that age, the world is going to be so stinking different, He's probably not going to need to learn how to drive. I'll probably still teach him, but he's probably not going to need to learn how to drive. There's going to be internet anywhere in the world. Mount Everest, South Korea, North Korea, wherever. And the advances in artificial intelligence, who knows what that's going to bring.
Yeah.
I'm really going off the reservation as far as space goes, but, we'll have people probably living on the moon. Let me put it this way. I expect that we have people living on the moon. We probably have our first mission to Mars, I would hope. If not already landed on Mars, very, very deep into the works, And that's 12 years. There's no reason why we can't get that done in 12 years.
Right.
Well,
and
let me one comment something that I have always felt strongly about, and I'll really take it off the rails here.
Go for it.
But I think one of the
I can always edit it out when
you may need to
off the reservation.
But the test mission is of course an extension of Kepler, etc.
Yeah, TESS. Yeah.
Our discovery of exoplanets will be in mass. That we will find tens of thousands of them, and I believe that science is pretty much in agreement that nearly every star in certainly in our galaxy, nearly every star has its own planetary system, and the development of a planetary system is simply part of stellar development. It's inherent. It's going to happen. And that a large percentage of those, of some percentage, are Earth-like planets, or at least in a habitable zone that could have breathable atmospheres, mild temperatures, etc. I think, and TESS is really kind of focused on our local stellar neighborhood. There could come a day, and maybe it's even soon, that we will discover that we have always been a part of a larger stellar community of intelligence. That day may come, and it may come sooner than we think. There's a train coming, I believe, and it could be in the next decade or two that the world would be a much different place, because we might find that we're in a community of intelligence and always have been, and how we see ourselves in this cosmos and how we communicate not just with each other but with our neighbors might completely change the way that we live. And we'll see, but that's off the rails a bit, I believe. But
you know what, that's more in purview than some of the things I was saying. So you're good. I don't know. That brings up the Fermi paradox, and
exactly.
my one last thing is directly related to that. The last segment, which is a little bit more humorous usually in the episode, but this gets me think. I've thought about this a lot over the years. There's definitely the numbers are on our side to say that there is life out there. If it exists elsewhere than this planet, then it exists elsewhere on this planet, and probably in an intelligent form, and probably has for a lot longer than we've even existed in a quote unquote intelligent form. We probably wouldn't qualify under their definition of the word. So why haven't we found them yet? Why
Where is
haven't
everybody? Yeah.
we detected them yet? Where are they? Where are they? They got to be there.
I understand, but could I interject? I'm sorry, Mike, for jumping on that.
No, I know where you're going with this.
Oh boy.
No, I am not. It's just my personal belief.
Go for it.
It's just my personal belief, but I just don't agree with the Fermi hypothesis. I just don't agree with it. Let's take it.
Okay.
Here's an example. Let's go back 1,000 years on planet Earth, and let's go to one of the European countries back in the 1400s or the 1500s, and those were times when we were tribal, and people back then must have wondered: is there anyone else around here? Just from us, our entire world was as far as we could see, or as far as our yak would take us. That was the edge of our known world. They must have wondered, is the world any bigger than this? Are there any other people out there? There must not be, because if there were, where are they all? They have always been there. They were across the seas. I mean, it's just because we don't have proof doesn't mean that it's not real. And so this whole Fermi paradox of if there are other intelligent life out there, where are they? We were thinking that 1,000 years ago about between Europe and America. And yet both of them were fully populated with intelligent species, unknowing that the other one had ever been even in existence.
I think
and until we actually had the ability to travel from one place to the next and discover that there were humans living on other continents and had been all the time, not until then did we ever know that, the Europeans or the Spaniards or whoever were the only people on planet Earth. And yet they're all the time.
I think that goes into when Fermi was bringing up the paradox. We're sending out all these signals everywhere. We should be getting signals back. Well, keep in mind the inverse square law. As it goes out, it degrades tremendously. The power of the signal degrades by a huge magnitude. So whatever you're sending out is not what the other guy is receiving 40 or 50 light years away from you. So a star system may be getting our signal. We've been broadcasting for 80 or 90 years by now. So somebody 40 or 50 light years away is probably picking it up, but they're not getting it nearly the same strength. So they simply cannot decipher what our I Love Lucy episode is looking like. So
sure. And so we started broadcasting back in the I Love Lucy days, which was maybe the 50s. We were broadcasting radio prior to that, but prior to that, we weren't broadcasting at all. So we were radio silent prior to Marconi, so to speak. We were radio silent for tens of thousands of years. Mm-hmm. There will be a time in our future, 100 years from now, that we will be radio silent again, because it'll all be optical. It'll be, various other types of communication outside of electromagnetic. And so we're broadcasting our existence for a period of about 300 years out of the tens of thousands or millions of years of human civilization. There's this little spike.
So you think that the signs are out there, we're just not looking for the right ones?
It may be that we are catching them before that spike of broadcasting their existence, or after that spike. They were radio silent before, we were. They were radio silent afterwards, we were. It was just that little piece of their technology where they were broadcasting this collateral electromagnetic radiation. If we don't catch them at that point in their history, we're going to think they don't exist, and they absolutely do. And so I don't think we should use that to judge whether or not we are alone, if that's what Fermi was talking about.
Well, and speaking of Carl Sagan earlier, it just all this talk actually gets me thinking about the movie Contact, which I remember watching.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, excellent
Great
stuff.
In an old theater in Colorado of all places. It was just a one like it was literally a theater from like the 30s or 40s. So it just had one projector, one screen, and I watched that with my father while we were on a vacation, and that movie is such a powerful movie.
Yeah.
The line, if there's nothing else out there, what a waste of space.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. What a waste of space.
It's
Yeah.
it's unimaginably big, and that's just what we can see. We don't even know how big the universe really is because all we have is what's observable, and we're almost certain that what's observable is not all that there is.
Well, once James Webb flies, and I hope that it does for obvious reasons, James Webb will have a multiple capabilities. One of them, though, is to look spectroscopically at the constituent parts of a exoplanet atmosphere during a transit. They can actually look and see those components of the atmosphere of that particular planet. If they were looking at us, if the roles were reversed using our technology, and there was a transit of Earth and the Sun, and they had a James Webb Space Telescope, and they could look in our atmosphere, they'd find helium and oxygen and carbon dioxide and nitrogen and all the things. They would see all of that. Would they also see the 208 atmospheric pollutants that are now in our atmosphere? Would they see those? And if they could, they would certainly understand that those aren't naturally occurring. That is the indication of an industrialized society pumping industrial pollutants into the atmosphere. What happens after James Webb flies and it goes first light, and a couple of years later it's targeting some of these test targets, which is what TESS is all about, is a bird dog, and it finds not only these constituent natural parts of an atmosphere, but it finds the evidence of industrial gas. What happens then? You
So,
see, they don't have to come
that
here.
is crazy to think about because you want to talk about having motivation and urgency to get out there. I mean, what's more motivation than
And they don't
trying to
have
get
to
a
be
capability
broadcasting radio
to now
waves.
communicate with whoever it is? So the next question then that always follows is, should we? Should we try and communicate with them if we know that they're out there?
Sure, we should.
Mhm.
What if they're evil and they're going to come and take down the earth and steal our water?
Yeah. Probably had it coming to us. No, I agree. Civilization that advanced has figured out a way to live together and not destroy themselves. So I would like to think that
The Klingons weren't.
Christopher, they're
Yeah.
Christopher,
I know. I'm being a little bit
I got you.
flippant.
if history tells us anything, it's going to tell us that we will eventually open trade routes between those planets if they do exist. And we will have war between some of them if they do exist. We've done that since the beginning of time. I don't believe that space exploration in essence is going to be any different than exploring the world's oceans like we did during the days of Magellan or of Captain James Cook. We will find new colonies of people, new lands, new opportunities for commercial trade, and new people to have war with. And it's going to be the same in the next century as it was in the last. It's just a bigger theater to play in. I mean, that's just a theory, but I think there are exciting times ahead. I hope all of us live to see it.
Agreed. So James, you missed a fantastic conversation about the Fermi paradox and aliens and all kinds of really cool stuff. You
Can't wait to watch that then on the podcast.
It was good stuff. Good. Moving on to organizational news. The 2019 Spaceflight Revolution 22nd Annual Mars Society Conference is coming up. We are starting our big push. You need to be there or be square. It's going to be in LA. All our conferences traditionally have had some really wonderful speakers. I have every faith that this year will be no different. There's a lot going on in space, so there's a lot to be talked about. James, do you have some more information on that for folks?
I do. So our conference this year, our 22nd Mars Society conference, will be at the University of Southern California for the first time in Los Angeles. And we're really looking forward to it. The theme this year is the space flight revolution. So these companies like SpaceX, Blue Origin, and others that are revolutionizing the cost to send stuff into orbit and hopefully get to Mars soon is the focus. We'll be announcing some of our speakers as the summer goes on. We're trying to get a lot of good ones this year. One of the reasons why we do them on the West Coast is so we can attract some of the talent at JPL and SpaceX and Blue Origin. And we've been able to do that in the past, and this year should be no different. If you'd like to come to the conference and speak and give a session talk, you can. Anybody can. You just send in an abstract to us. The deadline for that is the end of this month. And we're going to try to lock it down a little bit earlier this year so that we can print out all the materials and have those ready to go for the conference. So please get your abstracts in. It should be no more than a paragraph about what you'd like to talk about. You can follow it up with an actual paper if you want to, or just have that be your presentation when you do go to the conference. By the way, the conference is in October from the 17th to the 20th this year. It's a little later in the year because we wanted to have students at the university be present as well. We also will be organizing within our conference this year a one-day symposium on the Mars analog stations. So I know that's something Lucinda is really excited to be helping out with. And so we're going to try to gather together all the experts for Mars analogs worldwide and come to our conference and have a symposium inside of our conference, the 4-day conference this year. So it'll be one day there. I'm also going to organize a panel for space entrepreneurship. So I'm also actively looking for people who'd like to be on that panel. This is kind of a follow-up to my Seattle event where I talked to the Seattle space entrepreneurs about how to start a tech company that has a Mars focus and all the different economic development that Mars exploration will need. So we're going to have a panel at the Mars Society conference around space entrepreneurship. And if you're interested in being on my panel for that, just contact me. So again, October 17th through 20th, University of Southern California. There's a few hotel rooms still available at the hotel across the street that we have a deal with. But it should be a fun conference this year.
It's fantastic. I can't wait to see what's going on and be a part of it. So moving on, we want to congratulate Team Impulse out of Poland for winning the University Rover Challenge. And it was not an easy task this year because we had more applicants than ever before. Second place goes to Ryerson Rams Robotics out of Canada, so congratulations for them. And rounding out the podium was Stanford Student Robotics, right here in the good old USA. But no, Poland did fantastic. They had a really awesome entry. They all performed really well, and not just these three, but all of the teams. So, really successful challenge there. Absolutely,
it was our biggest University Rover Challenge yet. The Mars Desert Research Station was just packed with people this year, and the Poland team. Poland always makes a really good showing. They've been at it for several years now. So, congratulations to them for winning this year.
Yeah, good on them. And then the last bit of news for the organization is something that is close and near and dear to James's heart. And James, while you were gone, they also talked about they did something similar to this over at the Link Observatory, MarsVR Spotlight. So James,
yes,
tell us a little bit about this. It's nearing completion, and it's going to be open sourced and available free to the general public. Heck, y'all might even work with the Link Observatory to start getting this into classrooms.
Yes, so MarsVR is a project I've been working on for over a year now with the Mars Society. This is our mission seal there. You can kind of see it on my VR headset case, and I'm going to get out my VR headset to show you guys.
Oh, boy.
So basically, what we thought about a year ago was, why don't we do something with virtual reality because we would like to be able to show the general public more about Mars and about what we're doing at the Mars Society. And so I'll just kind of hold up my VR headset here. This is my Samsung Odyssey VR headset that I just got. It's really a great piece of hardware. But I've been using this to show our application here in Seattle at a bunch of different events. What we've done is we've scanned the real-life Mars Desert Research Station down in Utah that I just mentioned, was where the University Rover Challenge was. This is a base we built back in the year 2001, and we have 18 field seasons now under our belt. Over 1,200 crew members have gone through the station, and usually on 2-week-long crews of about 6 to 8 people each. They'll come and live at the base, and they'll pretend to be on Mars. They'll wear a simulated spacesuit to go outside. They'll do all kinds of geology, biologic research, medical research, human factors challenges research. So every 2 weeks, we have to train a new crew. And as you can imagine, that might get a little bit old for some of us to have to do that over and over again. So what we thought was, why don't we build a VR application so that these folks can train at home and they can understand where everything is at the base, where all the, where the kitchen is, where the lab is, how to do some of the procedures we have, like putting on a suit and going through the airlock and maintaining our rovers, reading off the propane tank gauges, things like that crews have to be trained on when they get out there. If they can practice it in VR at home, then they'll just be able to hit the ground running when they get out there. The other goal of this is to show what we're doing more to the general public. So because we have a mock-up of the Mars Desert Research Station in VR, for someone that doesn't know anything about this project, they could put on a VR headset for the first time and learn all about what we're doing in about 5 to 10 minutes and really have a visceral experience where they're walking around on a place that looks like Mars, even though it's Utah. It looks a lot like Mars. Minutes in VR, and it's just been a great thing. So I've taken middle school students through it. I've taken professional folks through it, people that use virtual reality as a career, but then also people that are new to it. It's had widespread, just universal positive feedback on this application. And so we started it about a year ago. We did a Kickstarter in May of 2018. We raised $31,000. And we used that money to scan the base. We flew a drone and captured a square mile of terrain around the base. We did this technique called photogrammetry, where we take a bunch of high resolution photos with a camera and then use a unit called a LiDAR unit. That's kind of like a laser rangefinder that will measure where all the points in space are for objects and for building exteriors and things like that. So we got all this data, we brought it back from the base, and over the last summer of 2018, we worked on the first version of the Unity application using this software called Unity that was originally made for games. We built this VR application, and one of the challenges we've been having is, although we scanned everything, not all the scans came out as perfect as we'd like them to be. So for example, we have tunnels connecting all the buildings, and it's basically like a hoop of chicken wire and then a tarp thrown over it. And so those didn't scan that great. One of the things we're going to do is kind of digitally remove all those and put in a 3D model version of it that you can walk through, so it actually functions more like a tunnel, actually looks better. So we're kind of in the process of doing that right now. I'm working with a great team of VR professionals here in Seattle at a company called MXT Reality in West Seattle. The CEO there is Jeff Rayner. He's been an excellent partner in this for the last several months with Mars, also with the Mars Society Seattle chapter. And so we're trying to finish that out right now. We could use folks' help. If you know VR, if you know Unity, or if you can create 3D models, we could use your help immediately. Just reach out to me. But we're finishing that out, and what we're hoping to do is we're going to give this away. Like, we're going to give this application away. I would love to see this application running in every museum in the United States and in every school for teaching about Mars. And really, that's what we hope to do with our MarsVR project long term, is create a lot of virtual reality tools that can be used for curriculum and for museum exhibits. So this is just the first phase of it, telling the story of the MDRS. But we hope to open source what we're doing and give it away for free. The training portion of it, we'll have sort of as an add-on, which we'll offer that to the general public for a fee, and we'll give it away to our crew members at the MDRS so that they can train with it. But the platform itself, just the MDRS base, anybody will be able to download and sort of get a guided tour of that base so they learn all about it. So that's kind of what we've been working on, and I'm really excited about it. And so this summer we hope to have our big version 1 release. I've already given it out to a bunch of early access folks that participated in the Kickstarter. I've also given it to some of our chapters worldwide, and some of the chapters have done events where they've shown this. And of course, myself here in Seattle, I've shown it quite a few times at our chapter meeting and other events like the Seattle VR meetup and the Space Expo that was at the Museum of Flight. And there's another one at the Pacific Science Center I showed it at. So I've probably gotten about 1,000 people through it on the last year, last like 9 months or so. So I'll keep doing that, and other chapters are welcome to contact me to get this build. And I actually even have a VR headset I can lend someone. So yeah, reach out to me if you're interested in showing this at your event. And it's also something we'll have available for download for the general public very soon too.
Now, excuse me if I'm being presumptuous, but y'all do some virtual reality over at the Link Observatory, right?
Say that again.
You guys do some virtual reality over at the Link Observatory, you were saying, right?
Yes, we do. So
would y'all be interested in working with James to maybe get this as part of a program if y'all found value in it?
Yeah, certainly, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Very cool.
All right.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. That's awesome.
Collaboration.
So, I just think that's really cool. Yeah. I'm sorry, I got to take a moment.
No.
So,
I think VR and AR is the educational tool of the future. It's because it's so immersive and it captures the attention of young students. The education is going to change, and probably in that direction.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
All right, guys. Well, James, thanks for that in depth, and we definitely you have both. Everybody has everybody's email, so we need to make some stuff happen there too.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay, so chapter news, SoCal. Well, before we talk about SoCal, we'll get there in a second. That's really the highlight, right? Mm-hmm. A couple of chapter challenges from Mars Society's executive director, Lucinda Offer, have been issued. So if you are one of our chapters anywhere around the world, you now have a challenge from the international director. She asks chapters to share with us what you are doing to celebrate the Apollo 50th anniversary this July, and if you are up to the challenge, she wants to request that you give outreach a try in July and get involved in local events to celebrate. I know the Link Observatory is going to be doing that. I know, James, you're going to be doing some of that.
Yep.
So one way to do that is to set up a table and meet and greet attendees and tell them about the Mars Society at one of these events that are going on in your area. An international grassroots nonprofit that advocates for humans to Mars. That's what the Mars Society is. We keep moving outward and upward beyond low Earth orbit and explore more of our solar system, beginning with Mars. There are definitely astronauts out there that agree with her on this, and not just her, us. Here is one thing you can set up on your table, developed with our Wisconsin member, Peter Koch: gravity jugs. Lucinda will make Peter's PDF available on our Mars Talk website as well as the Mars Society's website so that you can create your very own. But they are a genius tool that every chapter should have and can demonstrate the difference in gravity on the Moon and Mars and compare it to Earth's. Lucinda herself has adapted them and made gravity mugs. She uses them in the UK to do outreach and with the public and with students. They celebrate one of humanity's greatest achievements, and don't let it be our last. We need to get onto Mars. We need your help to do it. So get out there, set up a table, get the message out there, and this is a great way to get that done. So if you're part of our team, this is our challenge to you. Now, moving to the next, and the Link Observatory, we applaud all of y'all's work too, because we know that you do a lot of the same type of stuff with a broader aspect to it.
Well, we've worked with the Purdue chapter of the Mars Society the last several times, and they are a fantastic group. So we love working with them. We feel like we're kindred spirits with them, and we look forward to working with them again. So I think we've got some plans in the works to go up and see them. Yeah.
What's the big event going on there in Indiana?
Well, I know Purdue's hosting the 50th anniversary of Apollo, which Greg had alluded to. We've been invited to attend. We don't have all the details yet, but we are. I'm just going to grab my telescope and wander around the community and do like old John Dobson did. He used to lug his homemade telescope around and let people look at the moon. So that's kind of what I want to do. Just something just to hit the street and let people look at the moon and just appreciate it. So
there you go.
Yeah.
Cool deal. All right. Well, now we will move on to our chapter highlight. This is going to be SoCal. You have some recent history with SoCal since you helped reform it after 2017 conference.
Yes.
There in Irvine, California. Can you tell us a little bit more about it, James?
Absolutely. So the Mars Society has had a chapter in LA for several years, but it had gone dark a bit recently in the last 3 or 4 years. And so I actually go back and forth quite a bit to Orange County, California from Seattle for my day job. And so we also coincidentally had our conference in Irvine in 2017. And so I thought, why don't I try to get the LA chapter going again? And so we actually used the name SoCal just to make it a little bit of a different, rebranding from the previous chapter. I also coordinated with the San Diego chapter to make sure that they were okay with us using that name, because they are technically part of Southern California and quite an active chapter down there with Jerry Williams and his crew. They do the Mars movie night down there in San Diego a lot. So after the 2017 conference, I had a meeting and several people came to it. And we basically created a really vibrant chapter down there in the Los Angeles area. And the principal folks organizing it, other than me, are Leonard Ortiz, who actually works at JPL now. Although when I met him several years ago, he was just a college student and working at basically a metal shop. He's a mechanical engineer. Now he works at JPL, which is awesome. And then a couple other folks. Veronica Brooks is a great member of that chapter. She's very artistic. At our last conference, she brought a bunch of jewelry that she'd handmade, like all kinds of Mars and space jewelry. That was really cool that we were selling and giving out to people at the conference. So we've had a lot of success getting this chapter back up and running. They have events a lot. There was actually a big event they had last month when Dr. Zubrin was in town. They were able to organize an event at this facility near JPL. I think it's called the Collective, or maybe I don't have that right. But anyway, they were able to basically have a big event. They had my VR app. They had Dr. Zubrin speak, a bunch of other outreach stuff going on, and that was successful. They also do a monthly event along with the Griffith Observatory. That's that big observatory on the top of the hill in Los Angeles. There's an event called All Space Considered every first Friday of every month at the Leonard Nimoy Event Horizon, which is like a lecture hall there. Kind of a cool name for that. And so that's kind of the standing chapter meeting. A lot of people go to that. So if you're in LA and you want to meet some like-minded Mars people, definitely reach out to the SoCal chapter. You can find them on meetup.com, meetup.com/SoCal-Mars. There's also links on our Mars Society website. But I'll be down this summer, probably once or twice in the area, and I hope to organize a quick meeting with everyone and just maybe show the VR stuff and talk to them about things. But yeah, it's great. Another thing to mention, JPL does have a lecture series, and we've been doing a few meetings around that as well. They usually have the lecture at the Von Karman Auditorium at JPL, and then another one at the Pasadena City Hall, I think it is, sort of like Thursday night, Friday night. So we've also organized events around that, Mars Society groups meeting up afterwards. So yeah, definitely a cool chapter. And if you live in LA and you want to join the chapter, please get involved. Reach out to them on Meetup or contact me, and I can put you in touch with them as well.
You don't have to know everything there is to know about space or science or Mars to be able to be involved. One of the most invaluable people that I work with, Nora Hovey, which I think you guys know, and she's the one who introduced me to these guys. She does so much work for us, and you wouldn't call her an expert in space, but she has that passion, and she puts a lot of work into it. So you don't have to know everything there is to know in order to help out the cause.
That's right.
You just got to show up and do something. So I implore you to get out there if you are in the LA area.
We need people of all skill sets to help us get to Mars, and people of all skill sets can do outreach activities, talking to other folks about the Mars Society, handing out our literature, showing them our VR stuff, showing them things like the gravity mugs, which is a great demonstration that Peter Cook originally came up with and Lucinda's modified. So yeah.
Or even as simple as getting on a phone, sending a couple emails, and just helping with the logistics. I mean,
absolutely,
anybody can do that nowadays just from their phone. So, and anybody can do it, but we need people to actually do it.
Exactly. And if there's not a chapter near you, wherever you live in the world, if there's not a chapter near you, start one. Just reach out to us, and we can help you get going on it.
We have a whole team, Nora and Lucinda and myself. We will help you get started. And that's just part of our team. Okay, so moving on to one last thing. We got Amazon's satellite ground station is lacking in the FCC filings. So they set this whole thing up, and because they don't have the FCC filings, they might not be able to operate as readily as they claim to be. Our very own Dr. Zuberin decided to take the moment to really make a nice wit comment about it regarding the Fermi paradox, which we talked about a little bit earlier with the guys. James, you missed out on that conversation. I'm sorry. But clearly... Greg, I was telling you earlier, you were talking about what your theory was as to why the Fermi paradox is not really true. Unfortunately, you're clearly wrong. It's really because the FCC hasn't granted the aliens permission to send us signals here on Earth. That's why we haven't found them yet, according to Dr. Zuberin. So
yeah, I knew there was a reason.
I mean, it was a good theory. I gotta say, you had a good theory there, but probably just it was the FCC's fault.
They gotta send in that application,
government once again,
just like the rest of us.
It feels like a scene from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah,
bureaucracy.
Exactly.
Anyway, all right. So there's your laugh for the day. A little bit cleaner than last time. Thank you so much, James. Thanks, Mike and Greg, so much, guys, for joining me today. And thank you, friend, for being a part of it today. Without you guys watching, we really would just be talking to ourselves, and that's fun and all, but we really appreciate you being part of the conversation. We are just starting out. This is only episode 5, so I need your help. We need you to, like, subscribe, comment, share. Be part of that conversation and help us spread the word so that more people can be part of the conversation. Now, you can find all of our episodes online at marstalk.org, and all of the links to and all the attributions for all the content on our podcast are also there in the blog post for this episode. You can listen to it video and audio format, and there are links to that as well as all of our social media. We're on Discord, Twitter, Facebook, all of it. So, please note our social media has changed from when we first started. It is at Mars Talk Podcast. So Facebook and Twitter and Instagram is all at Mars Talk Podcast. Now, to get previews of what's going on, if you want to know some of the content that's probably going to make it into the episode long before it actually makes it into the episode, you just need to follow me on Twitter at Architectnade. That's ARCHITECHNID on Twitter. You can follow James at James Burk, JamesBurk, also on Twitter. And Mike, Greg, if they want to get in touch with you, how would they do so? First, you, Mike.
Well, we have a social media presence as well. You can find us on Facebook at Link Observatory, and we're also on Twitter at Link Observatory, LINK Observatory. So you can find us on Facebook and Twitter as well, and also on our website, linkobservatory.org. Where you can also find our contact information as well. But we are also very active on social media, and we'll be happy to share this podcast with our followers as well.
We look forward to that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, so you guys have been listening to Mars Talk, presented by the Mars Society. It is produced by Lucinda Offer, Nora Hovey, James Burke, and myself. Participants in this episode have been James Burke, Mike Newberg, and Greg McCauley, and myself. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Take it with the huge grain of salt that it's worth. But my best estimation would be that treaty is going to end one of two ways. Excuse me, my son must have been messing with his Lego alarm clock.
Uh-oh.
Speaking of Lego, hey Greg, there's my Saturn V all put together. That's what it looks like when you actually put it together.
That's nice.
I had to tease you about that because Greg has a Saturn V, but he hasn't put it together yet.
It's my granddaughter and I. It's a project, and we just we do it one package at a time. That really bugs you, doesn't it, Mike?
Yeah, it does. There's my lunar lander back here too. It's awesome.
There's mine.
Is it the Lego lander?
Yeah.
I see that.
Hang on. Let's
Mike, is that the Lego lander?
There it is, baby. Look how detailed that is.
That's awesome.
I have got to have that.
Yeah.
I'm so jealous right now.
Oh boy.
I am too.
Just had to give you a dig there, Greg.
I just love it. That's great.
Yeah.
There's my little. I got a little one here too. It's not Lego.
Oh, yeah.
So we're all showing them off. Where's yours, Greg?
I don't know.
It's in a box.
He's like, I was there. I helped them actually get it on the moon. I don't need a model.
Yeah, exactly. Mine's on the moon, Greg says.
You know, we're all geeking out about this stuff. It's like, I was there.
Yeah.
Okay, no, I apologize for that, guys.
It's okay.
So I got to remember what it was I was even.
So I have a